This is an ad by BetterHelp. BetterHelp recently surveyed over 16,000 people and found that while 75% of people believe it's wise to seek support, only 27% of Americans are in therapy, and people stay silent to avoid being judged. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching you with the right therapist, because we're all better with help. Visit BetterHelp.com/stopthestigma for their first ever State of Stigma report, the latest in mental health research.
Oh, Mrs. Garcia, you're a school counselor and new homeowner and grad student. You're an ANDER. National University supports the whole you, so you can focus on what matters most. Learn more at nu.edu.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey, warmer from Evo! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Easton Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, we're going to have aboard Curtis Rogers. He does such good work over at 710 Seattle Sports. We're going to be chatting with him about what he's all been making out of a lot of these teams out there on the West Coast. We'll give a little bit of love to Washington State. We'll highlight some of the teams that have been a little bit more stock up, stock down recently. We're also going to be hitting upon the fact that Gonzaga over the weekend was able to get a massive win, as well as we've got a lot of West Coast action that's going to be coming up on Thursday, so it's going to be a nice primer for that. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way, that is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but we sure did have a great day of college basketball on Tuesday. Let's take a look back at it. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
A pretty sizable upset by Syracuse. They get the job done against North Carolina, this by a count of 86-79, and the first time that these two teams played, Syracuse had given up well north of 100 points, so some good revenge there, and North Carolina has legitimately been a pretty good against the spread team for you all season long at about 11-14 ATS, and it's been rough for Syracuse. This win pulls them to 10-15 against the spread, but for North Carolina, it wasn't their outside shooting that was the issue. They went 12 of 27 from three-point range. They had Cormac Ryan along with RJ Davis combined for 37 points, and Armando Bacot and Harrison Ingram, they both had a double-double. The problem was for Syracuse, Judah Mintz, J.J. Starlin, that backcourt duo, it combined 48 points. Syracuse, they also win the turnover battle by a count of 11-8, despite the fact that they lost the rebound battle. They were able to do a nice job of being able to just execute on the possessions they had, as Syracuse shot 62.5% from the floor to be able to get this one in. Now, my DK Network right to pick for Monday, it was still in the balance when I was doing the show. We did indeed get the under in Kansas versus Texas Tech, as Kansas held to 50 points. Unfortunately, we were unable to get in Butler on Tuesday, though. We're sitting at 59-40 overall for the season, so we just need to respond and have a winner on Wednesday. So, I mean, one win, one loss in the meantime, so we're still doing relatively solid with these, but Butler, they just couldn't contain Tyler Kolek in this one, 78-72. Marquette is able to get it done for Kolek, 27 points, 7 boards, throws in there 5 assists. He was absolutely sensational. And for Butler, they do go 9-25 from 3-point range. Problem was they also lost the turnover battle in this game, 14-7, because they actually won the rebound battle down low, 39-34, but just the inability to be able to take care of the ball, that's where this write-up really did go a little bit awry, and things went awry for Cincinnati as well. They fall to Iowa State 68-59, an Iowa State team that has just been really, really beastly all season long. Cincinnati was unable to get anything going on offense. They did go 9-23 from 3-point range, but from 2-point range, they went just 10 of 27 and had 25 count them, 25 turnovers while making 19 field goals. When you have that sort of ratio, that's not great. Now, Cincinnati did win the rebound battle 38-24, as you did have Dan Skillings coming off the bench. He was able to give the team 11 points, but Taymon Lipsby, Keyshawn Gilbert, they combined for 27 points, despite the fact that Iowa State goes just 5 of 18 from three-point range. Those turnovers that they were able to generate, more than enough for them. Well, Illinois, they were able to get more than enough points to be able to cover against Michigan. 97-68. Michigan gets blown out once again, and it has been an almighty struggle for them. By the way, Illinois has all of a sudden turned into a very, very good over team recently. For Illinois, each of their last 4 games have gone over the total, and all but one of their last 7 games have gone over the total. As for Michigan, they go 1 of 10 from three-point range. Illinois, they go 12 of 25 from 3, as Terrence Shannon throws in their 31 points. Illinois wins the rebound battle 38-29. They win the turnover battle 11-8, and Doug McDaniel continues to be suspended for road games. Not sure why it's only road games, but he's suspended for road games, and Michigan is now 7-18 against the spread. So that was rough. Virginia has been pretty good at home and pretty awful on the road thus far this season, but in this one, the home and road splits, they were not necessarily in their favor, as Pittsburgh went 14 of 32 from distance to be able to down them 74-63 the final. Blake Hinson, 27 points on 5 of 13 three-point shooting. For Virginia, they just go 4 of 14 from the outside. Reese Beekman, Isaac McNeely, they combine for 34 points out of the team's 63, but for Pittsburgh, they had to avoid the turnovers against the Virginia team has been very good at generating them, and they did a great job here. Just 8 turnovers. Carlton Carrington, he only had 9 points, but threw in there 8 rebounds, 6 assists. Very well-balanced effort by them. Indiana State, their first game ranked since the Larry Bird era, they go down to Illinois State at home, 80-67. They picked a bad day to go 8 of 38 from three-point range. You still had 20 points out of Julian Larry in this one, but for Illinois State, they did a solid job being efficient from the floor, shooting over 50% there, and this was for an Illinois State team that was really not getting anything going whatsoever with regards to their offense. The last time Illinois State had scored north of 70 points in a game, you had to go all the way back to January 23rd, and this was Illinois State's first 80-point performance for this calendar year, so that's a little bit of a liability with Indiana State. They're not the world's greatest defensive team, and certainly on full display there, and you were able to get the over in that one. Drake, they survive and they advance against Evansville 78-75 in this one. That would have been a very ghastly loss for them, but Evansville looking a lot more competitive recently. They were able to cover the spread, and now they are 16-8 against the spread. Getting back Ben Humer-Rich's, their top scorer, has been very big for them, so that's a team that you do want to be watching out for. And for the George Washington team, they've been a vastly different team when they've been away from home, and they got drubbed on Tuesday 90-67 against George Mason, a George Mason team that did go 10 of 26 from three-point range and had a double-double out of Keyshawn Hall, 20 points, 12 rebounds in that one. Texas A&M, it's been a rough season for them thus far. Looked like they were getting back on track, and now they stubbed their toe against Vanderbilt, 74-73. The Commodores are able to get it done. As for Vanderbilt, sadly, they're only 10-13-1 against the spread. You'd think it would be much worse with the way that they have played, but for the Texas A&M team, they lose this game going 17 of 17 at the free throw line, 8 of 18 from three-point range, because they lost the turnover battle 12-5 as Ezra Magnon ran some very efficient offense and got the ball to Ben Allen Leuven. Leuven was able to give the team 25 points, and for Magnon, he was able to give the team 19 points and had just 1 turnover to be able to keep things very, very clean. Providence, in a nip-and-tuck game, they were able to get it done against St. John's by a count of 75-72. As for Providence, they got up very early in this game, and then from there, it was nip-and-tuck, but they go 8 of 20 from three-point range in this one, still dealing with the injury to Bryce Hopkins, but for St. John's, they go just 6 of 23 from three-point range, lose the turnover battle 16-15, and Devin Carter, double-double, 14 points, 11 rebounds. That is enough to be able to propel the team to victory. Now, because of Greg Peterson experience, that is from midnight to 3 Eastern Time, that'd be 9 to midnight Pacific. I do have to do this a little bit in advance. I'm recording this right around about 7:10 p.m. Pacific Time, so we do need to look forward a little bit, and I'll clean up on the podcast where needed, but right now it's looking like Georgetown is going to go down in a fiery heap against Creighton. They're down 20 points with 12 minutes remaining in the second half in that one, but a team has been rough all season long in terms of being able to cover out there in the MAC. They're going to be able to get this one in. Buffalo was finding themselves as an underdog in that neighborhood, about 9 to 9.5 points, currently down 4 points with about 25 seconds remaining. For Buffalo, it's just been all sorts of bad for them this season. They're going to go to 8-5 12-15 against the spread this season, while Northern Illinois, they're going to fall to 7-15 against the spread, but it does feel like Buffalo's starting to get a little bit of something going here as they went into overtime and they knocked off Georgia Southern over the weekend in that Sun Belt versus MAC challenge as well. So it does feel like the wheels are starting to turn there. BYU, they're currently up on Central Florida 39-26 at the half. This BYU team has just been an absolute flamethrower with their offense, but this defense has really been able to do a solid job, and Central Florida just has not been the same team away from home rather than at home, but did enter into this day 13-9 against the spread. BYU, they entered 14-9 against the spread, and then this Big 12 team, they entered into Tuesday 13-7-2 against the spread. Meanwhile, Iowa, by the way, Iowa State, they are now 17-7 against the spread with what they were able to do to Cincinnati, but Baylor, they are 13-7-2 against the spread. Right now at the half, they are in very good shape against Oklahoma. They are leading this game by a count of 40-27. We shall see if they're able to keep that up in the second half, and we shall see if Wisconsin gets zapped their 4-game losing streak. They were laying in the neighborhood about 9.5 points against Ohio State. Currently, they are in the lead, 38-24 second half, just starting with Stephen Kroll being able to put in their 16 points in the first 22 minutes of the game for Ohio State. They have shot about 34.5% from the floor, and this is a game that Wisconsin really, really badly needs. They got off to a really nice start to begin the season, but they are on a 4-game slide. Kentucky had lost 3 straight games at home going into Tuesday. Currently up on Ole Miss as I record this 43-29 at the half. Being able to get back into the full Trey Mitchell was very big. He had an impact in the first half, 5 boards, 5 points, and for this Kentucky team, they were able to shoot about 55.5% from the floor in the first half. We shall see if they're able to maintain that in the second half as well. So we had a lot of interesting results, including at the half as I record this. Colorado State up 44-30 at the half against San Diego State, and Florida, they just get by LSU. They don't cover, but they're able to get the outright win, 82-80, and that's been a lot of what Florida has been involved in thus far this season. As for Florida, the team has been about 11-1 against the spread. This advances LSU to now about 10-14 against the spread, but LSU did go at 11 of 21 from three-point range. You did have in this game Florida be able to dominate the glass, so 43-29. Need to be a little bit more consistent from the outside. They shoot just 12 of 20 at the free throw line, 4 of 17 from three-point range, but the rebounding that was able to get them to a very snug nip and tuck victory. And right now what we're seeing in college basketball is that these teams that are home favorites that are laying a number against the road teams that are ranked, they have been doing very, very well, but the home underdogs have fallen on some tough times. Now, we have seen a little bit of reversal of this over the last 7 days or so. Home underdogs on a really nice charge. 60-45-2 against the spread, despite the fact that mine and Butler did not come through. It's been much better recently. And the overs, they just continue to hit 160 overs, 146 unders, and we have had along the way, I believe, like 3 or 4 pushes on totals as well, so that's a 52.3% hit rate to the over the last 7 days. If you're looking at the entirety of the college basketball season, overs continue to hit at about 51.3%. 2,095 overs, 1,985 unders. Meanwhile, home underdogs overall 552, 563, and 19 against the spread. So that's what we're seeing right now in college basketball, and that's what we all got on Tuesday. Coming up next, let's take a look at what we're all getting on the West Coast, take a look at that landscape and so much more with Curtis Rogers, who does amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports, and he joins me next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now a part of the Houston Family Podcast. UW Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man as Curtis Rogers. He does such amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports. Taking a look at this great game of basketball that we all know and love. He is out there on the West Coast taking a look at all that we are getting. And I know he also does a great job as well. We typically talk a lot of Pac-12 Gonzaga, but on the mid-major front, he does an absolutely amazing job there as well. I know that he's done some good work taking a look at Eastern Washington. Hopefully we can see Seattle U be able to make some chase when it comes to their hopes of being able to make the NCAA tournament as well. And you're able to follow Curtis on Instagram along with Twitter/X at a kid from Kent all together. And Curtis, it is always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Greg, always happy to hop on this podcast with you. And what a slate of games we have this weekend, especially up here in the Northwest. A lot of jockeying for tournament position, a lot of jockeying for position atop the conferences, the West Coast Conference, the Pac-12, the Big Sky, whatever conference it is. A lot of movement and a lot of interesting results coming out of Saturday.
Yeah, there has been a lot of interesting results coming out the last few days. And first things first, I do need to get your thoughts on this because we've had a lot of chatter about Gonzaga. How big was it that over the weekend they went on the road? Wasn't necessarily thanks to their defense, but the offense, it was high-powered. They take down Kentucky because I really do think that there's some big takeaways with both of these teams in that Gonzaga, they horribly needed that win for their NCAA tournament hopes. That bolsters them. And all of a sudden for Kentucky, seeing on the old Twitter/X, a lot of people calling for the job of one Mr. John Calipari, and boy, that thing is looking like a wreck right now.
With Gonzaga, I mean, when your back's against the wall, style points don't really matter. And, look, they allowed 85 points to Kentucky, but hey, they got a necessary win on the road against number 17 Kentucky. Yeah, the Wildcats are slipping up right now. First 3-game home losing streak they've had since the Pat Riley era. That was when Pat Riley was a player, not a coach. So it's been forever since Kentucky has had this kind of struggle at Rupp Arena. But look, that's not Gonzaga's fault. They took care of business, got a tremendous front court effort from Graham Ike, Anton Watson, Ben Gregg. All three of those guys really poured in a great effort. Nolan Hickman even played well too. This Gonzaga team, Greg, I'm looking at their schedule. They finish off the regular season with 2 games against San Francisco and St. Mary's on the road. Those are going to be tough, but neither one of those teams are ranked. That's why Saturday's game was absolutely necessary for them to win because they had no more ranked opponents left at this point. Now, who knows? Maybe St. Mary's can play their way into the AP Top 25 ranking before that regular season finale hits. But right now, Greg, you look at Gonzaga, this was their last remaining opportunity to really impress the selection committee. They got it. Ended up getting, I think, one of the more impressive true road wins we've seen this season. And as for Kentucky, you mentioned it, they are in a free fall right now. I do kind of wonder what John Calipari's future is going to be in Lexington. It seems crazy to think, that they would move on from him. Maybe he looks elsewhere. But right now, this Kentucky team just not really playing up to the level of talent that they have on this roster. And that's kind of been the theme for that program over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, man, it has been relatively rough the last few years for this Kentucky team. Ever since they took that St. Peter's loss, things have really been torpedoing downward for them, and things are on the up and up for this team out there in the great state of Washington as well, because certainly sealing the show on Saturday was Gonzaga, but I know a team that you've talked about a lot on this podcast is Washington State. They go on the road. They get an absolutely mammoth win for themselves against Oregon. And all of a sudden, in a Pac-12 that has been, I think we both agree here, not great to say the least, Washington State is looking like a team that could contend for an at-large bid. And all of a sudden, Kyle Smith, it felt like he's been knocking on the door, but they haven't been able to get past really that hump, whatever you want to call it. It feels like this might be the year that they do so.
I think it is, Greg. I really do. This Washington State team is playing some very inspired ball, led by Miles Rice, one of the best stories in college basketball. A year ago, he was battling leukemia. Now he is leading this team in scoring. This Cougs basketball team, Greg, has played with a lot of heart. You look at what the transfer portal did to them following the end of last season, really picked apart that program, left them kind of in shambles in a way, and Kyle Smith, their head coach, was none too pleased about it, especially, I think, with the decision of DJ Rodman to transfer to USC, getting that NIL bag. But look, Washington State was able to rebound and reload. We talked to Kyle Smith this week on our show on Seattle Sports, and he talked a lot about the culture of the program, talked about how, look, a lot of coaches, a lot of players like to talk about the culture of the program. We don't do a lot of talking. We do a lot of showing, and they have done so this season. Just a phenomenal job by Kyle Smith. I'm looking at, Pac-12 Coach of the Year candidates. It's Kyle Smith, number one. Big gap between whoever it is between him and number two. Maybe you go Tommy Lloyd again, but I'm looking at this Washington State team right now, Greg. Not only did they get a win over Oregon, they beat Oregon State, they beat Washington. 3 must-have games on the road. They did it. First time they swept the Northwest since 1994 in consecutive games, too, mind you. This Cougs basketball team has been a lot of fun to watch up here in the Northwest. And, they haven't made a tournament since 2008. That's been a really fun story to follow up here over the last few weeks, especially as they have gotten hot. I think that win over Arizona earlier in the season in Pullman, I think that did a number for their confidence. I think it showed them, hey, we can hang with the big dogs. We can hang with the guys at the top of this conference. And, Right now, they are, just a half game back of Arizona before Arizona plays Colorado. If Arizona loses to Colorado, the Cougs are in first place, courtesy of that head-to-head tiebreak they have against the Wildcats. Now, they play in Tucson, I believe it's February 22nd, which is going to be one of the regular season games of the year in the Pac-12. I don't think anybody had anticipated that at the beginning of the year, especially with so much on the line between those two ball clubs. But this Cougs ball club, so much fun. One of the great stories in college basketball this season. And Kyle Smith setting himself up for a nice payday, whether it be in the Palouse or, who knows, maybe another school comes calling. That's just kind of what college athletics are these days. If somebody has a great season, everybody comes knocking.
Yep, then rightfully so that they come knocking, because my goodness, it has been an absolutely tremendous season out there in Pullman for Washington State, and they certainly have been able to rise up there. As joining me on the show, we do have Curtis Rogers. He does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and it certainly has been a fascination what we've been seeing out there on the West Coast. And we talk about Washington State out there in the Pac-12, and it's something that we've been harping on quite a bit, and I think that it's worth bringing up once again just how good this Mountain West Conference is. We are doing this there's still a few results pending from the weekend as we are recording, but that said, what have you just been making out of the last few days of what we have been seeing out of the Mountain West, and who are you really looking at to perhaps be able to separate in what has been a highly, highly competitive Mountain West that could end up getting, when it's all said and done, 5 teams in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I was looking at their standings the other day. I believe between first place and I want to say about 7th place, there's only about a game and a half separating the top of the conference. Just goes to show how competitive that conference has been this season. I look at that conference right now, Greg. I think a 5-bid NCAA tournament is very much within the realm of possibility. I just think that right now, the Mountain West is the most impressive conference out west, which is funny to say because, it's for so long it was the Pac-12. And in recent years, it was the WCC. And you and I talked about this last time. The Mountain West always had that cloud hanging over them of not having success in the NCAA tournament. They were typically a league that would get, 3, 4, 5 bids, and all those teams would be out come the end of the first weekend. Last year, San Diego State kind of rewrote the book on what we think about this conference. They've been highly competitive, this season, even after losing as much talent as they did after their Final Four run. I look at Utah State. They're a really incredible team to watch. Heck, even Boise State making some noise in the Mountain West. They're going to have a lot of fun this year in Vegas for that tournament. It is as wide open as it has ever been. You could really make the case, I think, for 6 teams to win the Mountain West tournament. That's going to be one of the most fun weekends on the college basketball slate, is when those group of schools get together in Vegas for the Mountain West tournament.
Oh, that is going to be absolutely tremendous. We are going to be seeing some great action out here in lovely Las Vegas. Hopefully I'll be able to go to a game or two of those because, man, those teams, when they go at it, you know that you're going to be getting some fireworks, and you know that you are going to be getting some great results that are going to be happening out there on the hardwood, as Curtis Rogers, who does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Curtis, what have you been making out of this college basketball season? Because we've been talking a lot about specific teams, but just as a whole, has there been really a theme? Has there been really anything in particular that has really been catching your attention the last few weeks?
I think the one thing I keep going back to in this college basketball season is just the difficulty it has been for these top teams to win true road games. We're seeing so many teams get knocked off when they're ranked, going up against even unranked opponents. It's just been pure chaos when it comes to true road games this season. That's why I think Gonzaga's win over Kentucky, Kentucky has struggled the way they have. I think that's why it stands out to me from this weekend of just how impressive it was, and knowing the situation that the Bulldogs needed to, get that win in order to keep their NCAA tournament hopes alive. To me, the truest measure of a great team is their ability to win on the road in college basketball, and the teams that go into these hostile environments and come away with victories. I don't think we can properly quantify just how difficult it is to win on the road. I know a lot of people look at these upset wins for unranked teams over ranked teams and being like, how could you lose to a team that isn't ranked? How could you lose to a team that's in the back half of your conference? And it's like, well, it's tough traveling. It's tough playing in these environments. And, these are 18 to 22-year-old kids that have never had to play in any environment this electric before. So obviously it's going to do a number on you. So that's kind of been my theme this season, is just how difficult it is to win on the road, even more so this year. And I think to that point, NIL and where recruiting is right now, I think has kind of evened the playing field a little bit more, with guys kind of getting the opportunities that I think they were hoping to in places where they weren't getting it. Guys going from big schools who have the talent but aren't necessarily able to crack the rotation, going to lower schools and finally getting that playing time and showing that they've had the talent all along. So parity in college basketball is as big as it's ever been for me, at least. That's kind of been a couple of the themes that I've been looking at this season, Greg.
Oh, no question about it. We are going to be seeing a lot of very interesting games that are going to be going down on Tuesday as well. So that is going to be a lot of fun. As joining me on the show, we do have Curtis Rogers, who does amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And we always talk about the power teams with you, and I was alluding to it. You also do an amazing job taking a look at the Big Sky, taking a look at the WAC. And how do you feel about both of those teams that are out there in your neck of the woods? With Seattle, it's been a tremendous defensive effort for them all season long. Sometimes the offense has left a little bit of something to be desired, but I've been very impressed by them. And then when it comes to this Eastern Washington team, I really do feel like they're putting themselves in a good position to be able to make a run in the Big Sky tournament. Obviously, they'll need to win that Big Sky tournament to make the NCAA tournament, but really like the tenor of both of those teams out there in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, they've been making a lot of noise this season. Seattle U, Cam Tyson, they've really been competitive. They gave Grand Canyon one of their only losses this season. So that was an impressive victory for Seattle U. And Eastern just continues to win. They continue to roll through the Big Sky. We saw it last year where they had a near perfect run in the regular season in the Big Sky, falling near the end of the regular season and then falling again in the Big Sky tournament. I think that kind of allowed them to refocus. I think they know what they need to do this year in order to make the NCAA tournament. David Riley has done just a fantastic job coaching that ball club over there in Cheney, Washington. And how about basketball in the area code 509 between Gonzaga getting that big win against Kentucky, Washington State rolling right now in second place in the Pac-12, and Eastern Washington top the Big Sky. East of the mountains up here in the state of Washington, they've had a lot to root for in terms of college basketball, and it's been a lot of fun to watch, and just storylines abound with those three schools.
Yeah, it's been really good to be able to watch those teams. And then I always have to ask you this question. It's a tried and true tradition on this podcast. I know you do a great job just watching a little bit of everything when it comes to the college basketball landscape. Is there a team or two that you've been taking a look at the last few weeks and they're really starting to pop on the radar and you're liking what you're seeing out of them?
Liking what I'm seeing? Well, a team that I'm not liking is Wisconsin. Holy.
Oh, gosh, yes.
They were 16-4, now they're 16-8. I'm kind of wondering, are they even a tournament team at this point? But, yeah, I think right now in the western part of the United States, I think UCLA is one kind of in the opposite direction of Wisconsin. Got off to such a slow start this year. They were looking dead in the water. And then all of a sudden, they've rattled off a few wins in a row here. I'm not necessarily, buying them as an NCAA tournament team, but they definitely have the talent to make a lot of noise in the Pac-12 tournament. Considering where they were at one point this season, I think they were, 6-9 or something like that. To battle back and be competitive right now in the Pac-12, tip of the hat to Mick Cronin. I know Mick Cronin is a very feisty guy. He's not somebody that's going to take any sort of compliment for, being around 500, but at least being competitive right now beats the heck out of where that program was just a few weeks ago. The Bruins making some noise and definitely, I think, catching the eye of a lot of teams in the Pac-12, this team's not going to be one that we can, just give half effort against. They are going to be competitive here in conference play, and I don't think anybody really wants to see them come Las Vegas.
No, I don't think so as well. And for UCLA, the offense is finally looking like it's existent. I'm not going to say that it's amazing, but it's a whole heck of a lot better than where it was a few weeks ago. Man, that was really, really brutal to say the least. But here they come. All of a sudden, UCLA has been looking a little bit better, but a man that is always firing all cylinders, a man that is always at 110%. That'd be you, Curtis. I always appreciate you coming on this podcast, lending your insights, so let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, Twitter and Instagram at A Kid From Kent is where you want to get these takes in 180 characters or less. And then also seattlesports.com is where you want to be for all of our content. Yeah, like I mentioned, we spoke with Kyle Smith, Washington State head coach, earlier last week. Great conversation. You can catch that at seattlesports.com. Click on the Cougs tab. It'll be right there for you. And then obviously with the Super Bowl being played this week, the NFL season is coming to an end. It'll be in our rear view for at least a little bit. So no better time to jump in on college basketball than right now. And no better podcast host to bring you on home to March Madness than Greg. And Greg, always appreciate stopping by. Look forward to our next conversation.
You are too kind, my friend, as Curtis. He does absolutely tremendous work. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins this podcast, he lends such amazing insight and did so once again today. A big thanks to Curtis for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. It is always great to be joined by Curtis Rogers. He does such good work over at 710 Seattle Sports, taking a look at this great game of college basketball and really everything out there in the Pacific Northwest. He does a great job of breaking down everything from the Seattle Kraken, the NFL front with the Seattle Seahawks. I know that he's getting set for baseball season as well, and every single time he joins this podcast, lends such good insight. So big thanks to Curtis for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNN_D1. We are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games that are in the bigger conferences first, and then the smaller conferences, those are going to be at the bottom. Those are in time order as well, and the smaller conferences today are going to be the Big South, the Patriot League, and the Independent. So I'm looking at Chicago State along with the Atlantic Sun, and if we have any MEAC or SWAC games, those would be at the bottom as well. So how about if we get things started with 655, 656 on the betting board. Michigan State hits the road face-off against Penn State. Penn State is an underdog of 4 to 4.5 points. Total on this game, it is between 145.5 and seeing straight 146 out there as well. And I did set my total 146.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the over. This Michigan State team does see a fall off with their defense when they're away from home. They're giving up nearly 18 points more per 100 possessions in a road/neutral court environment rather than when they are at home, but I still do think that they're going to be able to get by this Penn State team. I did set them as a favorite of 4.5 points. Take a look at when these two teams hooked up in January, and Michigan State won that game by 31 points. I think that this is going to be a little bit more competitive and that Penn State shoots better than 3 of 29 from three-point range, but that was just a thorough butt kicking as he saw Ty Walker in that game get right around his season average. Overall for the season, he's registering 19 points per game. He had 22 points in that first affair, and Michigan State just does a really good job of not turning the ball over, and they go up against a Penn State team in which that is their lifeblood. Penn State is a top 15 team in the country with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, this Michigan State team, they're a top 30 team in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and the first time around, Michigan State, they held onto the ball. They only turned it over 12 times, while Penn State turned the ball over 16 times. And while this Michigan State team does leave a little bit of something to be desired down low, Maddie Sissoko, really your top rebounder with about 6 to 6.5 rebounds per game. They're going up against a Penn State team that is quite vulnerable down low, other than Qudus Wahab, who's done a solid job being able to supply you with about 7 to 8 rebounds per game. You really don't have anyone that's able to get the job done down low. As a result, Penn State 330th in the country in terms of rebound rate. You've got a Michigan State team that they're about 156th. Now, I will say this about Penn State. They've done a nice job of being able to guard the three-point arc. They're a top 50 team in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but this Michigan State team can do a relatively solid job of guarding the arc themselves. Michigan State 31st in the country in terms of their own three-point shooting percentage, are actually shooting north of 40% from three-point range away from home compared to 35% from three-point range when they are at home. So Penn State's certainly going to have their hands full once again, much like the first time around. But in terms of that three-point shooting defense, they're about 60th in all of college basketball, though they do allow opponents to shoot 35% in a roadside shoot court environment. For Penn State, you've had Nick Curran going. He's been able to give the team double figures quite a bit recently. I do like what I'm seeing out of Kanye Cleary along with Ace Baldwin. Cleary's been able to give you about 17 points per contest. Baldwin more around 14 points, 5.5 assists, and does generate 2.8 steals per contest as well. But I do think that Michigan State going to be a little bit too much to handle. Penn State, well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and if this team is not generating turnovers, it's typically doomsday for them. And I do think that Michigan State does a good job of being able to take care of the ball. I did set my total 146.5, looking at the over, and with Michigan State, I made them a 4.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay 4 with them. 657, 658 on the betting board. Youngstown State plays us with Robert Morris. Old Bobby Morris is an underdog of 11.5 to 12 points. Your total on this game between 147.5 to 148. I did set my line at 12, so here at 11.5, I'm going to be willing to lay with Youngstown State. Youngstown State, quite an improved defensive team this season. Last year, it was quite suspect for them, to say the least. They've ascended into the top 100 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. As for Youngstown State, while they have been able to improve their defense, their offense, it has taken a little bit of a fall off in terms of their three-point shooting. Last year, this team was shooting about 36.2% from the outside. This season, they're shooting about 32.9% from three-point range, and Youngstown State actually shooting a little bit better away from home in terms of their three-point shooting rather than when they are at home. But they're going up against a Robert Morris team that they have been all sorts of a roller coaster as well. With Robert Morris, the big issue for this team has been the turnovers, north of 13.5 per contest. You bring in Justice Williams, but he's been turning the ball over right around 2.5 times per contest, while only giving up 2.5 assists per game for a Robert Morris team that away from home shoots less than 32% from three-point range. Marquise Hastings does a good job down low with about 8.5 boards, 16 points per game, but he's going to be matched by Ziggy Reed along DJ Turn It Up Burns. Burns is averaging a double-double, 12.5 points, 10 boards, 2.5 assists, while shooting 34% from three. And then Ziggy Reed, who comes in from Merrimack, just a 6'6" do-it-all guy that shoots 42% from three, 14.5 points, 5 boards. I really like his overall game, and it's a big reason why this Youngstown State team has been much improved on the glass as well. Youngstown State is 67th in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate, and despite the fact that Hastings has been pretty rock solid down low for Robert Morris, they're only clocking in more around 77th, so Youngstown State has a little bit of an advantage there. Youngstown State also doing a much better job of being able to hold on to the ball as well. They're only turning the ball over about 11 times per contest. Brett Thompson has been able to give you about 4 assists, chips in there 12.5 points per contest, and Brandon Rush has been able to throw in there about 12 points per game as well. I do think that Robert Morris is going to be fighting quite a bit of an uphill battle. Now, credit where credit is due. In regulation, this team has now given up fewer than 72 points in 4 of their last 5 games, but if you take a look overall for the season, this team is still well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while the offense has continued to scuffle as well in regulation. 72 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, going up against a Youngstown State team that they've really gotten it going with regards to their offense. 78 plus points in each of their last 5 games, and Robert Morris, one of the bottom 75 teams in the country with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So I do like Youngstown State to control this game. I did set them as a 12-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and did make my total 148. Youngstown State has been cranking up their tempo just a little bit recently, and this is a Youngstown State team that they do a very solid job with regards to their defense, but their offense certainly does ascend when they're at home, and they're going up against the Robert Morris team that overall, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, is 294th, giving up 110.1 points per 100 possessions away from home. So looking at the over, and with Youngstown State, want to lay up to 11.5 with them. 659, 660 on the betting board. VMI, it's a road face-off against Furman, and Furman is a 24 to a 23-point favorite, and your total on this game is 164 to 164.5. Set my line at 22.5. I do think that we've went a little bit too far. I recognize that this VMI team is stinky. They have given up north of 100 points like 5 times in the last 35 days, so just not great to say the least. That said, I do think that we've just went a little bit extreme. It's a Furman team that they've been improving from three-point range. A big key for them has been getting back into the fold their main scorer, as they had Marcus Foster out for quite a few games this season. Ever since he has returned, the offense has been able to ascend, as he has supplied the team with 17 plus points in 4 out of the last 5 games, and for Furman overall. They have been able to generate about 80 points per contest, but it's just not as efficient as it was a season ago. 12.5 turnovers per game. They shoot about 32.5% from three-point range. Good news is they go up against a VMI team that in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are well outside the top 325 in all of college basketball. And for VMI, they're a bottom 50 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. It's not like this Furman team has been amazing on defense either, though. They're 227th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For Furman, you've got one guy in Foster that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, and that's about it. And Deshaun Jackson, who's able to supply VMI with 10 rebounds per game, should be able to help out down low. You've got Brendan Watkins, who has also been able to give this VMI team right around 3 assists, 15 points per contest, shoots 37% from 3. Now, the big issue for VMI, the turnovers. They are a bottom 30 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they are not going up against a Furman team that has been amazing at being able to generate turnovers. They're just 241st in all of college basketball. They really don't see too much of a boost when they're at home rather than when they're in a roadside shoot court environment. And this is a Furman team that has done a solid job of being able to guard the arc. They're about 136th in all of college basketball, but they don't do a very good job on the interior. It's a VMI team that has been shaky all season long with regards to outside shooting. So I do think that this is a circumstance where VMI is able to play a little bit better than they did the first time around. First time these two teams played, Furman went on the road and they won that game 100-60. In that game, Furman shot 18 of 37 from 3. VMI went 5 of 25 from 3. Is VMI going to win this game? No. Is there going to be a little bit of positivity for them rather than the first time around? I do think so. I set my line at 22.5. I'm going to be willing to take the 24. I did set my total at a 164.5. I'm seeing a 164 out there. No reason to not think that Furman's going to be able to get past 85 in this one. I do think that VMI is going to shoot better than 5 of 25 from 3. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with VMI. 661, 662 on the betting board. UMass, it's a road face-off against Richmond. The itsy bitsy Spiders are a 3 to 3.5 point favorite. Your total on this game between 143.5 and 144. I did set Richmond as a 4-point favorite. Here at 3 to 3.5, I'm going to be willing to lay it. This Richmond team has really been able to get up and after it on defense. This is a top 40 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for UMass, it has been slip sliding a little bit, but this team has been able to do a solid job in terms of their defense. They're about 103rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but take caution because they do give up 13.4 points more per 100 possessions in a roadside shoot court environment rather than at home. For the UMass team, they've really been looking to do it with rebounds and turnovers. UMass, a top 60 team with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis. In terms of percentage of missed shots that do result in an offensive rebound, this is a team that does rank in the top 40 with that regard as well. Matt Cross, Josh Cohen, they've been able to combine for just under 15 rebounds per game, 31.5 points per contest, and Cohen shoots 35% from three-point range, while UMass being a top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game, only turns the ball over about 11 times per game. They're not quite as efficient as Richmond, though. Richmond, a top 3 team in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, the one place where Richmond is going to be dominated is down low. Richmond is outside the top 260 with regards to the rebound rate, despite the fact that Isaac Bigelow, Neil Quinn, these guys, they've been able to give you about 12.5 rebounds per game, while also being able to supply about 24 points per contest. But they've got the king in Jordan King, 19 points, 2.5 assists, shoots 43.5% from three-point range. Richmond as a whole, they do shoot 36.4% from the outside, and they're facing off against a UMass team that, in terms of their perimeter defense, it has been very much up and down this season, to say the least. They allow opponents to shoot 36.7% from three-point range in a roadside shoot court environment, while Richmond, they have been very solid at cutting off the arc, 21st in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Richmond, not a team with necessarily a ton of depth right now, but that's because they do play at a slower pace. They're well outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. UMass, they're playing at a top 75 clip in terms of total possessions per game, and you've had Rashul Diggins coupled with Keon Thompson be able to supply the team with about 23.5 points per game. Diggins does shoot 37.5% from 3, but with UMass only shooting about 32% from three-point range, and with Richmond doing such a good job of being able to take care of the ball and just really being able to bear down on defense in general, this Richmond squad has given up north of 70 points just once since the turn of the calendar, and for that matter, this Richmond team has given up 70 points or or fewer in now 11 out of their last 12 games. So I do think that Richmond going to be able to do a rock solid job on defense to be able to get this one done. I did set my total as a result at a 142. So going to be looking at the under on 144. I'm willing to lay up to 3.5 with Richmond 663, 664 on the betting board. The Citadel plays those to UNC Greensboro. Greensboro is a 4 to 4.5 point favorite. Your total on this game is 136, and I did set Greensboro as a favorite of 5.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the 4 to 4.5 with the UNC Greensboro. The defense has been slip sliding away recently, and it's been touch and go for this Greensboro team. Like in late December, early January, they were really getting it going with their defense. Now they're in a stretch where they've given up 78 plus points in each of their last 4 games. And that's just the UNC Greensboro experience. Meanwhile, they do go up against a Citadel team that has just been really struggling to score. In regulation, this team has scored 64 points or fewer in each of their last 4 games that wrapped up there. They did play an overtime game against Furman in which they scored 72 points in regulation. They added on a few more points in overtime. So if you're looking at regulation and regulation only, the Citadel has not exceeded the 72-point plateau here this calendar year, but they do a pretty solid job of being able to hit the glass. Quentin Malora Brown, who comes in from Vanderbilt, 10.5 points, 9 rebounds per contest, and then when he's been out there because he's been out of the fold for quite a while due to injury, Winston Hill has been able to give you some boards as well, but he's most likely going to be missing once again in this game. But for the Citadel, I do think that they're going to have a nice little advantage there. They're about 138th in the country with regards to their rebound rate. Meanwhile, this UNC G team, they're more around 198th, but for UNC Greensboro, they certainly do have the advantage from the outside. This is a top 25 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage, and you got Mr. Do-It-All and Mikhail Brown-Jones, who's been able to supply you with 21 points per contest while shooting 48.9% from 3 and leads the way with 8 rebounds. He has been absolutely incredible for a UNC Greensboro team that only turns the ball over about 10.8 times per contest. Now, to the credit of the Citadel, they do have 2 really good guards of their own, Elijah Morgan, AJ Smith, who are combined for about 31 points, 8.2 boards, and Morgan shoots 41% from 3. Smith more in that pocket, about 36.5% from distance. And to the credit of this Citadel team, each of your top 3 scorers, they do shoot north of 80% the free throw line, but really outside of your main guards, you really don't have a lot with regards to the Citadel offense. It is a big reason why they have been scuffling quite a bit, and they have been quite inconsistent with their play. The Citadel 237th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and though Greensboro has slipped outside the top 150 with regards to their points allowed on a per possession basis, they're now 101st with regards to their total offense. So a little bit of a situation of something's got to give. This is a Citadel team that isn't as good in the backcourt as Greensboro, and Greensboro, they do lack a little bit of something down low, but I do think that in the end, having the best player out there on the floor in Mikhail Brown-Jones, coupled with the Langley brothers and Kobe along Keyshawn Langley, who I absolutely love. Keyshawn has been able to do a nice job of being the main scorer with 14.5 points, shooting 40% from 3, and then Kobe Langley just does the little things, 2.2 steals, 6 assists, 9 points per contest. I do think that UNC Greensboro is going to be able to get back online. I do think that this is going to be a lower scoring affair. I do think that Greensboro gets back to basics on their defense. I did set my total 133.5, dive it under, and I'm going to lay up to 5 with Greensboro. 665, 666 on the betting board. South Florida is going to be playing us to Tulsa, and Tulsa is an underdog of 9 to 9.5 points. Totals between 148 and 149, and I did set Tulsa as a 9.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay it with South Florida. South Florida has really been able to ascend with their defense, a top 80 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and what I've been very impressed with the South Florida team is that they've been able to do a really good job of rebounding by committee. They've only got one player in Keyshawn Pryor who gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. The South Florida team, they're about 193rd in the country with regards to rebound rate, which doesn't sound great, but compare that to Tulsa, who's 269th in the country with this regard. That is absolutely massive, and for Tulsa, it has become very clear that their defensive numbers that were so good in the non-conference portion of the season, out of conference, they were a top 35 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That was built up because they played a Sherman soft non-conference schedule. They are now 97th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They didn't hit the road too much out of conference. Now in conference, you take a look at their splits, and they're giving up 18 points more per 100 possessions in a road/neutral environment rather than at home. So it's really caught up with them. They do have PJ Haggerty, who was able to give you nearly 20 points. He, along Kobe Williams, have combined for about 7.2 assists per contest, but neither of these guys shoot well from 3. They combine to shoot about 30% from the outside. You've been able to have Jared Garcia be able to supply you with about 6 rebounds per game, but for South Florida, Pryor should be able to win that battle. And for South Florida, first month plus of the season, this team was shooting a miserable sub-27% from 3-point range. Now they're shooting about 35.7% from 3. You look ever since that game against Florida State, they're shooting north of 38% from 3-point range. range as a collective, with Celton Miguel, Chris Youngblood combined to shoot about 40.5% from the outside with 29.5 points per game. You've been able to get some really good facilitation as well out of Jaden Reed, who hasn't been too much of a scorer as a freshman, but he's really been able to ascend in the way that he just doles out the ball, doesn't turn the ball over too much, and that's been a big reason why South Florida has had the success that they do. And they go up against the Tulsa team now that has been one of the most up-tempo teams in all of college basketball. Tulsa, they're in the top 50 in all of college basketball with regards to total possessions per game. And South Florida, they become more of a mid-tempo team this season. They're about 180th with regards to total possessions per game. I do think that things are going to be cranked up a little bit more. I do think that Tulsa certainly going to give up their points as they have been doing all conference long. As for Tulsa, you take a look at the way that they have just been surrendering points. They've given up 70-plus points in all but 3 of their conference games. Meanwhile, you've got a South Florida team that, while they've been very dominant with their defense, they've given up fewer than 70 points in each of their last 4 games. They went up against Charlotte, North Texas, East Carolina, and Rice, 4 teams that just really aren't putting up points, and I do think that things get cranked up a little bit more in this affair. So, did set my total 153.5, going over, and with South Florida willing to lay up to 9 with them. 667, 668 on the betting board. It is Fordham, and they play us to St. Bonaventure. The Bonnies are a favorite of anywhere between 3.5 to 4.5 points. Total on this game is 142.5. Said St. Bonaventure is a 5-point favorite, so going to be one to lay this number. With St. Bonaventure, this is still a top 85 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're not quite on the torrid pace that they were at the beginning part of the season, where they had given up like 72 points or fewer in like 12 out of 13 games or something like that. But this has still been a team that has been able to do a pretty solid job, and they don't do a bad job of hitting the road as well. St. Bonaventure only giving up 2.5 points more per 100 possessions in a roadside-neutral environment rather than at home. Due to recent games, they're up to 92nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but still, all in all, doing a solid job on that side of things. Going up against a Fordham bunch that they're just not efficient with their offense, and that's because they just can't get out of their own way. They need to find that main point guard. They've had Jasoph Metter along with Irontrell Charlton combined for about 6 assists per contest. Charlton, a little bit of a do-it-all guy. He only gives you about 6.5 points, but throws in there like 4 boards, 3 assists. He'll give you like a steal per contest, and the Metter really doesn't do anything other than score and facilitate 11.5 points. Shoots 36.5% from 3-point range, and this is a Fordham team that they still do rank with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis right around 90th, but they're actually giving up about 3.6 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a roadside shoot-to-court environment, and because they can't get out of their own way on offense with the turnovers, 268th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, so that has been relatively awful. It's a Fordham team that they also only shoot about 65% at the free throw line, so that has been very intriguing to take a look at with this Fordham bunch. They should be able to do a solid job down low. You've got Abdul Sambilia, who's been able to give you about 6.5 boards, 2.5 blocks per contest. He's been able to do a nice job down low, and they've got a glut of different guys that do give you quite a bit of rebounding, but at the same time, with St. Bonaventure, Chad Venning being able to give you about 5 rebounds per game is big, and the top-end talent for St. Bonaventure from 3-point range, I do think is going to be able to win out in this spot. You've got a trio of guys, Charles Pride, Moses Flowers, Micah Adams-Woods, who all shoot at least 38.6% from 3-point range. Pride, 7 boards, 12.5 points per game. Micah Adams-Woods, 14 points at about 3.5 assists per game. And for St. Bonaventure, though they are a bottom 75 team in the country with regards to total possessions per game, they just do such a good job of holding on to the ball. They do rank right in that neighborhood of about 75th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and with this team being a top 100 team with regards to their rebound rate, Fordham, they do a solid job on the glass as well. They have a little bit of a leg up there, but with the Bonnies being able to maintain there, I do think that they go on the road, get the job done against a Fordham team that really has been worse with their defense when they've been at home, but at the same time, the St. Bonaventure team, they have been able to do a solid job being able to D up when they have been away from home. It's been a little bit rough for St. Bonaventure recently on defense, but I do think that going up against a Fordham team that has not broken the 71-point plateau in each of their last 5 games, a good get-right spot for them. I did set St. Bonaventure as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number and also made my total 141. So diving in on the under and willing to lay it with the Bonnie. 669, 670 on the betting board. Chattanooga is playing us to East Tennessee State. East Tennessee State is a underdog of 7.5 to 8 points. Your total on this game is between 140.5 and 141.5. I just set my total 146.5. I'm looking at the over. With Chattanooga, I really do like the chemistry that this team has because you've got a pair of top-flight guards that have played with their coach in Dan Earl for a very long time, as you've got Trey Bonham along with Hunter Huff, who were playing with Dan Earl while they were over at VMI. Now they've come together and they've been able to supply this team with a combined about 34 points, 6 assists per game, and with Bonham, ever since he has become eligible, missed the first 9 games of the season due to the 2-time eligibility rule, has shot 46% from 3-point range for a Chattanooga team that overall, they are shooting about 36% from 3-point range as a collective. That is a top 75 mark in all of college basketball. basketball. For Chattanooga, this has never been necessarily a dominant defense, but they're better this year than they have been in past seasons. For Chattanooga, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, about 190th in the country. Now, a little bit of a buyer beware with them. When they do hit the road, they're much different, but that bodes very well for them in this game. They're giving up 14.8 points more per 100 possessions in a roadside shoot-to-corner environment rather than at home, so that means that ETSU is going to have their hands full. And ETSU, they've been an okay defense as well. They're about 156th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now they're going to have a tough time going up against Sam Alexis, who's able to give you about 9.5 rebounds per game, but you've had a pair of guys in Jaden Seymour along with Karen Boyd who've been able to combine for about 14 rebounds per game. Neither of these guys give you a lot of versatility, and then you do have Jaden Parker who's come in from North Florida. He's been able to give you about 2.3 blocks per contest as well, but I do think that Chattanooga going to be able to hold their own on the glass. They're about 132nd in the country with regards to their rebound rate. East Tennessee, they're more in that pocket, about 120th, so both of these teams very comparable there. But I do think that what is really the difference maker for the Chattanooga team, the fact that they do a good job of being able to take care of the ball, about 11 turnovers per game. ETSU, they're more around 12 turnovers per contest, and ETSU just can't pop it from three-point range. They're 257th overall in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and a big reason why they shoot about 29.3% from three-point range. You got Ibi Asamoah coupled with Kumari Peterson, who have been able to combine for 28 points per contest. Great name on Peterson, who's been leading the way with a little bit over 3 assists per contest, but I do think that Chattanooga just has too much offensive firepower here for an ETSU team. That, man, you talk about a team that has been stuck in the muck. They have scored 63 points or fewer in each of their last 4 games. Meanwhile, Chattanooga has gotten to at least 88 points in 4 of their last 5 games, so you've got 2 very big extremes going at it in this game. I do think that it causes for a little bit more of a higher scoring game. I do think that Chattanooga is going to give up theirs in this one, but I do think that ETSU going to be able to bust out first time around. It was Chattanooga who went on the road, won that game by kind of 81-74 in a game where ETSU still only shot about 6 of 28 from three-point range, which is why I did set a little bit higher total. I did set my total 146.5, went at the over. Chattanooga made them a 10.5 point favorite, so going to be willing to lay the 7.5 to 8 to go along with that over. 671, 672 on the betting board. Xavier hits the road. They're facing off against Seton, and Seton, a 1 to 1.5 point favorite. Your total on this game is anywhere between 144.5 to 145, and with Seton, I did make them the favorite of 2 points. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 1.5 in this ordeal. Seton is going to have the rebounding advantage down low. Really like what Jaden Bediako has been able to do. I have my question marks with him coming in from Santa Clara, being a little bit of an up transfer, but he's been able to supply Seton with darn near 8 rebounds per game and has really been able to give them some rough and tumble, as Seton is a top 40 team in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate. And Xavier, they've been able to get a good addition in Abdul Usman. He comes over from North Texas. He's able to give you about a block and a half per contest. He's done a solid job being able to supply about 6.5 to 7 rebounds per game, as the Xavier team is about 79th in the country with regards to their rebound rate. Now, for Seton, it has been a little bit suspect in terms of their overall offense. This team only shoots about 31.8% from three-point range as a collective, as Dre Davis, Elamir Dawes, they combined to shoot about 34% from three-point range last year. Both of these guys shot a little bit closer to 40% from three-point range, so you'd like to see them ascend a little bit, but this has also been a Xavier team that has been hot and cold with regards to their offense. Xavier is only about 159th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. That compares to a Seton Hall team that is clocking in more in the neighborhood of about 146th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And for Seton Hall, much better at home with their offense, 11.9 points more per 100 possessions for them, and they do have Mr. Do-It-All and Kadari Richmond. 5 assists, 2 steals, 16 points, 7 boards. There's just nobody on Xavier that really does compare, though I do think that Davion McKnight is doing a solid job. He gives you 5 assists, 12 points, not quite the same on the boards, but to shoot 38.5% from 3, and then Quincy Oliveri, 5 boards, 19 points, shoots 45% from 3, but you just need a little bit more depth with this team. Would like to see Trey Green be able to ascend a little bit more. He's been playing limited minutes, shooting about 35% from 3, about 5 points per contest, like what Usman has been able to bring to the table, but this is a Xavier team that, all in all, it does become a team that becomes a little bit more suspect on defense when they do hit the road. It's actually been a little bit of an improved defense from a season ago, but in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're still clocking in right around about 98th in the country, and I do think that Xavier is going to allow just a few too many open looks against a Seton Hall team that they themselves have been able to do a solid job of being able to lock it down from three-point range at home. Opponents shoot 30.4% from three-point range at home against them. Meanwhile, Xavier on the road does allow opponents to shoot about 35.8% 50% from distance. So I did set my line at 2. I'm going to be willing to lay the 1.5 with Seton and did set my total 146. This is still a Xavier team in the top 75 in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that this is close enough for late game filling, so I'm looking at the over, and I'm going to be looking at Seton Hall. 673, 674 on the betting board. Fort Wayne plays those to Oakland, and Oakland is an underdog of a point, seeing them as a 1-point favorite in other spots as well. Total on this game between 151.5 and 152. I did set Fort Wayne as a favorite of 4 points. I'm going to be one to lay the one. What is interesting about Oakland is that they're giving up about 11 points fewer per 100 possessions in a roadside shoot-to-court environment rather than at home, but Oakland is just going to get gashed from three-point range. Oakland is about 255th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, this Fort Wayne team really does a nice job of being able to guard the three-point arc, 56th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. And Fort Wayne, one of the best teams at being able to hold on to the ball. In games at home, they are in the top 25 in terms of fewest turnovers on a per-possession basis. Now, it has been a little bit of rough sledding for this Fort Wayne team recently on defense, but if you look overall for the season, they're still a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, going up against an Oakland team that's outside the top 250 with this regard as well. And for Fort Wayne, you still have a lot of guys who are able to stroke it from three-point range, and now you've got that constant to be able to get them the ball in Rasheed Bell, who comes in as a D2 transfer from UW Parkside, 15 points, 4 assists, does turn the ball over 2.5 times per contest, but gets the ball to Jalen Jackson along Quentin Morton Robinson, a duo that's been able to combine to shoot about 44% from three-point range. They combine for about 29.5 points, 4.5 assists in their own right end. This team does a good job of being able to take it away. With this Fort Wayne team, they generate about 10 steals per contest. The aforementioned three-point shooting gentleman that I was mentioning before, they combine for about 3 steals per game as well. It's really been Eric Mulder down low who's been giving you some boards with right around 7 per contest. It is a Fort Wayne team that's outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate, but other than Trey Townsend, who's able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game, it is not as if this is a bunch in Oakland that's necessarily been laying the world on fire with regards to their rebounding either. Now, I do like Blake Lampman, a guy that's able to give you double figures. He's been able to do a solid job shooting in the high 30s from three-point range in his own right, but I do think that the way that Fort Wayne is able to generate turnovers is going to be very, very prevalent in this spot. Fort Wayne is a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this is an Oakland team that they just really don't put the pressure on you on defense. Rocket Watts has been just a big giant nothing burger for this team in terms of Oakland. They're about 189th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and with the way that Fort Wayne has been able to generate those turnovers and just pushes teams out of sorts, I do think that they find a way to get the job done at home. So I did set Fort Wayne as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. Did set my total at 154. This is a Fort Wayne team that's in the top 50 with regards to total possessions per game, and this is an Oakland team that has all sorts of gasoline in terms of their defense. So going to be looking at the over and willing to lay it with Fort Wayne. 675, 676 on the betting board. It is Cleveland State. They play the UW Milwaukee, and Milwaukee does find themselves as an underdog of 4 points here. Total on this game is between 156 and 157. I did set Cleveland State as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's not quite on the same level as Fort Wayne, but this Cleveland State team over the last few seasons has been very good at being able to take the ball away. They're about 84th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, or in the top 75 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and it's the UW Green Bay team. They are really suffering on defense, 284th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They're outside of the top 310 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, I do like what BJ Turn It Up Freeman has been able to bring to this team. BJ Freeman has been tremendous. He's able to give you 18 points. He's able to supply 6 boards, 3+ assists. I mean, he just does a little bit of everything. And this is a UW Milwaukee team that is in the top 110 with regards to rebound rate. Meanwhile, Cleveland State, they're outside the top 225. So UW Milwaukee going to have a little bit of an advantage there with guys like Faison Fields and company being able to do a solid job of supporting Freeman down low. But the perimeter defense is all sorts of ghastly. It's a UW Milwaukee team that they just have been giving it up time and time again. Now, to their credit, they have actually given up 71 points or fewer in 3 of their last 5 games. It doesn't sound like much, but it's a little bit of something for them. But that said, they go up against a Cleveland State team that all of a sudden has been able to pop threes much better than they have in past seasons, as they're shooting as collective about 36.1% from 3. If you do have trepidation with laying it with Cleveland, they do shoot just 66.7% at the free throw line, but Drew Lauder, Tay Williams combining for about 24.5 points per contest has been absolutely massive for this team. You got a 45.5% three-point shooter in Tevin Smith, who's been solid, and then Tristan Enaruna. He's able to match the versatility of BJ Freeman. 6 boards, 3 assists, 1.3 steals, a block, 19 points per contest. Really like the way the Cleveland State has been able to operate all season long. They go up against a Milwaukee team that the first time around was able to knock them off 88-80 in that game for UW Milwaukee. They did a very solid job of winning the rebound battle 45-31, even though Cleveland State only turned the ball over 5 times in that affair. I do think that you get, once again, a bit of a higher scoring game. I do think that Cleveland State does end up going downward a little bit with their three-point shooting, and we've been noticing that UW Milwaukee in recent games, they've been slowing things down a touch as well. A big reason why a lot of their games have been going over recently is that they have played a grand total of 3 overtime sessions in their last 5 games. That has very much warped the numbers of UW Milwaukee with regards to their defense. They're so bad, there's no question about it, but I don't think that they're as ghastly bad as we've been seeing. And for this Cleveland State team, they themselves have given up 72 points for fear in 3 of their last 5 games. So I do think that this is a little bit of a lower scoring game. I did set my total 155.5. I'm looking at the under of Cleveland State. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with them. 677, 678 on the betting board. The game everyone's been waiting for. IUPUI, old UEPUI. It's the road to face off against Detroit. Winless Detroit is a 5.5 point favorite, and your total on this game is anywhere between 142.5 and 143. I thought I was a sicko for making this Detroit team a favorite. Man, I made them a 4.5 point favorite. I just can't do it. I have to take the 5.5 points here with IUPUI. Detroit has won 0 games straight up, and granted, the last time these two teams played, Detroit got down like 20 plus points in that game, but they were playing without their top scorer, Jaden Stone, a guy that's able to supply you with 20.5 points, 5.5 boards, shoots only about 30.5% from 3, but in comparison to the rest of the team, they're shooting 27.2% from 3-point range. That's actually a little bit of an upgrade, but you do have Eduardo Del Cadero, who's been able to give you about 5.5 to 6 rebounds per game. He's been relatively solid for this Detroit team down low, but you've actually been able to have Quincy Samuels on the flip side, being able to supply this IUPUI team within that neighborhood about 5.5 or so rebounds per game. And I do like what Jalen Counter is able to bring to the table. Counter is able to give you about 5 boards, 15 points, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Like, both of these teams are awful. Both of these teams are outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Both of these teams are outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Both of these teams are horrible at guarding the 3-point line. Neither of these teams do a good job on the glass, and I do like what I'm seeing out of Marcus Sankersley for Detroit. He's been able to supply the team with about 16 points per contest. Has really been able to go on a little bit of a heater recently, as he's been able to score at least 24 points in each of the last 3 games, and that's a big reason why Detroit has been playing some very harebrained games recently. The Detroit offense has been able to come to life with 67 plus points in each of their last 3 games. Boy, are they giving it up right now, though. This Detroit team, they have given up 75 points or more in all but one of their games since the turn of the calendar, going up against an IUPUI team that they themselves come in having given up at least 78 points in each of their last 5 games. You take a look at the first time that these two teams squared off. It was just before the turn of the new year. That was a 67-55 slog in which neither team could put the ball in the basket. You saw both of these teams combine to go 9 of 39 from 3-point range. I do think that both of these teams are going to be a little bit warmer in this spot. It is clearly a case of something's got to give, and I do think that Detroit gets their first win of the season, because if they don't get it here, goodness gracious, it's just not going to happen. But I, in good conscience, cannot take a winless team laying 5.5 points here. I set my line at 4.5. I'm going to be willing to take 5 plus here with IUPUI, and I do think that this is a little bit of a lower scoring slog, much like we saw the first time around, so also looking at the under. 679, 680 on the betting board. Northern Kentucky is going to be on the road facing off against UW Green Bay, and Green Bay is a favorite of 2 points. Your total on this game are between 137.5 and 139. A little bit of a revenge spot here for UW Green Bay. I did set them as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Last time these two teams met, UW Green Bay was quite cold with regards to their offense, and this has been a UW Green Bay team that has been able to crank it up quite a bit more. So I'm going to be looking at them in this ordeal against a Northern Kentucky team that is still very much short-handed. Sam Vincent, one of their just top overall players, was giving the team like 12 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, led the team in steals. He's been out of the fold for darn near a month, and that has really caused for this team to not be quite the same in terms of being able to generate turnovers, and they go up against the UW Green Bay team that's going to have by far the best player out there on the floor, and that'd be Noah Reynolds. 20 points, 4.5 assists, while shooting 36.5% from 3, and this UW Green Bay team has really been able to heat up from 3-point range. Each of their top 5 scorers now shooting at least 34.9% from 3-point range as a collective. They do shoot about 35.4% from 3-point range, going up against a Northern Kentucky team that, despite the fact that they play slow, they're well outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. They're just not really that good in terms of their defense. This Northern Kentucky team, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're more in that neighborhood, about 275th, and they are giving up north of 17.5 points more per 100 possessions when they are away from home rather than when they are at home. And while the struggles have come inside, as Northern Kentucky actually does a good job from the outside. They allow opponents to shoot 32.8% from three-point range in a road/shooter environment, so that's actually halfway acceptable, but this team just gets completely gashed on the interior, and even though this UW Green Bay team doesn't necessarily have a ton down low, you've been able to have someone in Elijah Jones be able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. They've got good up and down rebounding, and it's a team in Northern Kentucky that has Trey Robinson, who's been able to supply the team with about 6.5 rebounds per game down low, but this team has been getting massacred on glass all season long, 249th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Now, UW Green Bay certainly has had their issues as well in terms of finding that dominant post player, but they've actually ranked about 113th in the country with regards to rebound rate, and you just got a bunch of guys like a Foster's Wonder, who is a three-point shooting specialist. I was mentioning Jones, him being able to do a solid job down low. You've got a lot of guys that they just really know their role for the team. They play very efficiently, and for UW Green Bay, they're still a team that's well outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game, but they've really got it going on offense. They've scored at least 78 points in each of their last 4 games, and the defense has been solid as well in regulation, because they did have a game go to overtime a few weeks ago. They have now given up fewer than 70 points in 4 of their last 5 games. Prior to that, they had actually given up the 74 points to Northern Kentucky. That was a game that was played in late January. In that game, Northern Kentucky and UW Green Bay both very cold from three-point range. They combined 9 of 43 from three-point range, so I do think that that's going to crank up a little bit, but that said, I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring slog, and you're noticing this Northern Kentucky team just being all over the place in terms of both their offense and their defense. They have now gotten past the 79-point plateau in 2 of their last 3 games, 78+ in each of their last 3, but prior to that, they had scored fewer than 60 points in each of their previous 2 games without having in the fold their main guy in terms of facilitation and Zam Vincent. They've been looking a lot more to Michael Bradley, who's been able to give you about 4.5 assists per contest, and you do have a nice go-to scorer in Marcus Warwick, but he's only shooting about 32% from three-point range. I do think that this UW Green Bay squad going to be able to do a good job holding up at the point of attack and is going to be able to get the job done and some revenge. I did set my line at 4.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with UW Green Bay, and I did set my total at 138.5. I do think that this is going to be a lower possession game, so here at the 139, looking at the under, and I'm going to be taking a look at UW Green Bay with the point, 681, 682 on the betting board. Clemson plays us Miami. Miami is an underdog of 7.5 points. Your total on this game between 150.5 and 151.5. With Miami, I did set them as an underdog of 6 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Clemson. The team, without a question, has been a really good offense. Both of these teams, for that matter, top 45 teams in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. It's all about holding up on defense. And for Miami, they do have their defensive warts on the road. They are giving up about 14.6 points more per 100 possessions in a road/shooter environment rather than at home. But for Clemson, this is a team that does rank 180th in the country in terms of points allowed per possession, and I do think that PJ Hall is going to have a little bit of a tough time with no Chad Omier. Omier has been very dominant down low for this Miami team, has been able to give them some rough and tumble with about 10 boards, 17.5 points, and at 6'7", he's able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range, as you've got no shortage of three-point shooting options for Miami. Miami as a whole, they shoot about 36.5% from three-point range, but out of your top 4 scorers, 3 of them shoot at least 37.5% from 3, and the lone exception is Omier. Now for Miami, the 12.5 turnovers per game, that has been a little bit unsightly for them, but Miami is by far the better perimeter defense in this one as well. They are 36th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They really do get gashed down low. Meanwhile, you've got a Clemson squad that they are going to give you quite a few open looks from three-point range. Clemson 183rd in the country with regards to three-point shooting defense. Now, they have Joe Girard, who might be the best pure scorer in this game. You got Wooga Poplar on the flip side for Miami, shooting about 42.5% from 3, but Joe Girard, he's right in that neighborhood as well with Clemson. You do have Hall, who's been very versatile for the team, and then you have Chase Hunter, who's doing a nice job being able to dish out the ball with about 3 assists, 12 points per contest. Just really is a little bit of a floor general out there for a Clemson team that does a better job of being able to hold on to the ball. They're only turning the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, but got a lot of similarities with both of these teams, and I just don't think that Clemson is so much better to where they should be a 7.5 point favorite. This is a Clemson team that they do rank 24th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and this is a Miami team that they are a different team when they're away from home. They are scoring about 13 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home, and as a matter of fact, they have slipped to 76th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. It has been a little bit rough for them recently, but I do think that with Omier doing a solid job down low, and with this Miami team being able to get a little bit more on defense, it doesn't sound amazing, but they've given up 75 or fewer in each of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you do have a Clemson team that they themselves themselves have been up and down in terms of their offense. 71 points or fewer scored in 3 of their last 5 games, and Miami's going to be able to hold in there. I do think that both of these teams do erupt a little bit more offensively. I did set my total at a 154 here at the 115.5, 151.5. I'm looking over, and I'm willing to take the points with Miami. Set them as a 6-point dog, 683, 684 on the betting board. Notre Dame plays us at Georgia Tech. Rambling Wreck of Georgia Tech is a 2.5 to 2-point underdog with your total 132 to 132.5. And with Notre Dame, I did set them as a favorite of 2 points. Here at the 2.5, I'm going to be willing to take the points. Last time these two teams met up, Notre Dame went to overtime on the road against Georgetown and was able to pull it out, but that was a very sloppy game, and I do anticipate seeing much of the same here, as that was a game that was able to go over the total, but it took overtime to be able to get there. Both teams scored 64 points in regulation, and this Notre Dame team is in the bottom 75 in all of college basketball in terms of being able to take care of the ball. While Marcus Burton is able to give you 4 assists, 16 points per contest, it's 3.9 turnovers per game. That leads all power conference players that qualify. You've got a Notre Dame team that's also shooting only about 30.5% from 3, though I will say Brandon Shrewsbury being able to shoot about 36.5% from 3, 9.5 points per contest, and each of your top 3 scores for Notre Dame shooting north of 80% of the free throw line. For Notre Dame, they're not bad on the glass. Now, their top 6 scorers, you do have 4 of them that do supply north of 4 rebounds per game. Not like this team is some sort of juggernaut on the glass or anything like that, but with Notre Dame, in terms of their rebound rate, they're about 96th in all of college basketball, though Bay Ndongo, I do think, is going to be the top rebounder in this game. For Georgia Tech, he's been able to give the team in that neighborhood about 8 or so rebounds per game. This is a Georgia Tech team that does rank in the top 50 nationally in terms of percentage of missed shots that do result in an offensive rebound. And for Georgia Tech, they've been able to find a nice go-to facilitator in Nathan George. George was really a little bit of an afterthought in terms of his facilitation towards the beginning part of the season, but has really taken hold of the offense ever since the turn of the new year. He has had at least 4 assists in all but one game. That one game was actually the previous game when against Louisville he had just a big giant nothing burger in that game. That was a little bit of a less than savory performance, but all in all, Georgia has been able to elevate this Georgia Tech team. You've also been able to still have Miles Kelly be a nice constant, being able to give you about 15 points, 6 boards. Doesn't shoot it well from 3. This Georgia Tech team as a whole, they only do shoot about 32.5% from the outside, and they do go up against a Notre Dame team that they continue to put the clamps down on you on defense. They're a top 85 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Notre Dame, not great with regards to their 3-point shooting defense, but they're not bad, about 176th in the country with this regard. Meanwhile, it's a Georgia Tech team that they've been able to do a solid job of being able to lock down from the outside. 68th in the country with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, allowing opponents to shoot still just 33% in a roadside shoot court environment. I think we see a lot of what we saw the first time around. A lot of sloppy play, a low-scoring bleeder of a game where neither team is really able to get very good shots. I do think that in the end, Notre Dame is going to be able to pull it out, but I think that it's going to be very much a nip-and-tuck game that Georgia Tech is going to be able to hold in there on, and I do think that for Notre Dame, you do have to question the offense being able to do enough to be able to cover this game with them scoring 60 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. So I did set my total at 130. I'm diving in on the under. Made Notre Dame a 2-point favorite, so here at 2.5, that is my buy point on Georgia Tech as well. 685, 686 on the betting board. Wofford is on the road playing against Mercer, and Mercer is a favorite of 2 to 1.5 points total on this game between 134.5 and 135. I did set Wofford as a underdog of 3 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Mercer. The Wofford defense has been a little bit more efficient in conference play, but it has still been pretty grody this season. Wofford, 321st in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Mercer, it just feels like they're very meh in just every single category. They're about 169th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're in that neighborhood about 230th with regards to rebound rate. They're an okay 3-point shooting defense. They're not great. They're not terrible at about 231st, so I will say they allow opponents to shoot 31.5% from 3-point range at home, or like 36.5% away from home, but they're just very average across the board. Meanwhile, Wofford, well, they are explosive in terms of giving up points. They are 319th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but they are going to have the best scorer in this game, and that'd be Corey Tripp. Tripp has been able to give this team a nice trip of about 3.5 assists, 16 plus points per contest, shoots in the high 30s from 3-point range, and then you're going to have down low the top rebounder in this game in Kyler Filewich. Filewich has been able to do a nice job of supplying about 9 or so rebounds per game. And for Wofford, they don't do a tremendously bad job on the glass. In terms of the rebound rate, they're clocking in right around about 104th in all of college basketball. And for Mercer, really, other than Jalen McCreary, who's been able to give you about 5 boards, 15 points per game, you don't necessarily have a ton down low. So that is a place where Mercer is going to be losing the battle a little bit, but with Mercer. They do also have a guard duo that is able to pop it from three-point range. Robbie Carmody, coupled with David Thomas, are both shooting about 36 to 36.5% from three-point range, supplying the team with about 16.5 points per contest. You've been able to get just really good consistency on this team with them turning the ball over about 11.5 times per contest. They don't necessarily have that one primary guy other than McCreary. It's just a whole is greater than some of its parts effort going up against a Wofford team that they just have been really allergic to playing defense all season long. And the one time that they played defense against East Tennessee, they give up 57 points in that game and they put up 50. I mean, it has just been absolutely remarkable there. Meanwhile, you've got a Mercer team that they've been pretty consistent with their defense as well, giving up fewer than 70 points in 4 out of their last 5 games. So good old situation of a pair of dueling styles. I did set my line at a 3, so I'm going to be willing to lay with Mercer. And I do think that this is a little bit more of an explosive up-tempo game, as Wofford all season long has proven to be rough on defense. So did set my total 141, looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Mercer. 687, 688 on the betting board. Belmont is going to be playing us to Southern Illinois. The Salukis are a road underdog of 2.5 points. Totals between 143.5 and 144. I've got this completely flipperoonied. I've got Southern Illinois as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be taking a look at them outright on the money line. I just buy into the defense much more of Southern Illinois than I do the offense of Belmont. Belmont has some good three-point shooters, and they've got guys with size that are able to pop in from three-point range as well. You've got Malik Dia along with Kay Tyson. These two guys, they've been able to combine for about 34.5 points, 9.5 rebounds per game, and you've been able to have Dia be able to shoot about 34.5% from 3. Tyson, he's supplying you with about 44.5% three-point shooting, and then you've also got Jacoby Gillespie, who's been able to pair up very well with Keyshawn Davidson for a little bit over 8 assists per contest. So this is a Belmont team that, in order to be able to get some good looks from three-point range, they shoot 37.3% from three-point range. It does lead to a few more turnovers. You'll notice that with a lot of teams that shoot it well from three-point range. They turn the ball over about 12.8 times per contest, but with this Belmont team, 286th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, I will throw in that they're giving up 14 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/neutral court environment, but for Southern Illinois, they're more around 115th in the country with this regard, and Southern Illinois, they actually shoot it a little bit better from three-point range, and they've got Xavier Brown, a do-it-all guy that gives you about 6 assists. He's been able to supply the team with north of 22 points per contest. He is a top 5 player in all of college basketball in terms of the scoring, and this Southern Illinois team, they completely shut down the arc. Belmont's lifeblood is being able to hit these threes. Southern Illinois, they allow you to shoot 29.2% from three-point range overall. This ascends to 30.7% from three-point range when away from home, but they do a really good job of being able to guard the arc. And then, but couple that with the fact that you got Clarence Rupert down low for the Southern Illinois team. He's been able to do a good job supplying the team with about 6 boards per contest. You've got so many guys that they just sort of know their role. They don't necessarily have a bunch of explosive guys around Brown that are going to go off and have massive games or anything like that, but a BB has been able to give you like 4 boards, 6 points per contest. You got someone like an AJ Ferguson who's able to supply 9 points. He chips in there right around about 4 rebounds per game, and Southern Illinois keeps it clean and efficient. They turn the ball over 11.4 times per contest. They themselves really don't generate a lot of turnovers, but they also shoot about 76.5% of the free throw line, so they do the little things really well. And for this Belmont team, you just don't necessarily have a ton down low when it comes to the squad as well in terms of the rebound rate there, 293rd in all of college basketball. Southern Illinois as a collective, they're more around 116th. I do think that the overall rebounding and the three-point shooting defense of Southern Illinois going to be able to win out in this spot. I did set my total 144.5. I do think that this is going to be close enough for Lake Infilling, and we have been seeing the Southern Illinois team giving up a few more points recently. They have given up 70 plus in 3 out of their last 4 games. Granted, 2 of those games did go to overtime. Meanwhile, this is a Belmont team that they have just been giving up points aplenty, 78 plus in 3 of their last 4 games. So I'm going to be taking a look at this total over, and I like Southern Illinois outright on the money line, 689, 690 on the betting board. Murray State plays us to Missouri State. Missouri State is an underdog of 3 to 3.5 points. Total this game is between 136.5 and 137. I did set Murray State as a favorite of 4.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Missouri State. This is still a top 125 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this is still one of the better teams at being able to guard the three-point line in the country, but Murray State has really been able to come alive with their defense. This Murray State team was awful on defense to begin the season. They're still just 265th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, while Missouri State is more around 103rd in the country, but the Missouri State perimeter defense not the same when they're on the road. They allow opponents to shoot 29.8% from three-point range at home, more like 34.5% from 3 when they're in a road/neutral court environment, but for Missouri State, State, what was a lifeblood in terms of their defense, is starting to turn into a little bit of a pumpkin. We've noticed that recently. And for Murray State, this team plays relatively slow, under control. They're outside the top 250 with regards to total possessions per game. And I do think that they're going to be able to do a nice job of pestering a Missouri State team that shoot about 32-33% from three-point range. Now, you do have some good versatility with this Missouri State team. I like what Elson Mason has been able to provide this bunch. He's been able to supply 18.5 points, 3.5 assists per contest, but when it comes to Missouri State, you just need to have a little bit more in terms of the perimeter game, as Mason and Donovan Clay have been able to provide a little bit north of 6 assists per contest. But I really like what Murray State has going with regards to their two guards. And Jacoby Wood, along with Rob Perry, they're providing 25 points, 2.5 steals. And with Wood, he's able to shoot about 42% from three-point range. And it's a Murray State team that they do a really nice job of taking care of the ball. 9.3 turnovers per contest in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. This is a top 50 team in all of college basketball. And even though Murray State doesn't necessarily have dominant rebounding, Nick Ellington is the only guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. Each other top 4 scorers do provide at least 4 rebounds per game. Missouri State is going to be able to win that battle down low with Missouri State. You do have someone like an NJ Benson who's able to give you 7 rebounds per game, so they've got better bigs in this spot. Donovan Clay is someone that's able to give you some good rebounding as well. That's why they're 36th in the country with regards to rebound rate. Murray State, they've been doing a little bit of a better job on the glass recently, still just 237th in the country, but if you just look at how Murray State has been playing on defense recently compared to the beginning part of the season, just leaps and bounds better. The last time that Murray State gave up north of 70 points in a game, they gave up 72 against Indiana State 6 games ago. So they've really been able to ascend here. They've, as a matter of fact, given up 73 points or fewer in every single one of their last 12 games. I do think that Murray State is going to be able to do a solid job locking down here and that they're able to get the job done. I did set my line at 4.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and I do think that this is going to be a game that's going to be close enough for late game falling. And as I was mentioning, as Murray State has ascended with their defense, we've seen the decline of Missouri State giving up 70-plus points in each of their last 5 games. So I'm going to be looking at the over and willing to lay up to 4 with Murray State. 691, 692 on the betting board. But Radley plays us at Illinois Chicago. UIC is a underdog of 14 points. Their total between 140.5 and 141. I did set Bradley as a favorite of 12 points. I do think that 14 has went a little bit too far. I'm going to be willing to take the points. With Illinois Chicago, they've had some very interesting splits in terms of their defense, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis all season long. This has been a top 90 team in the country, but they're actually allowing about 6.5 points fewer per 100 possessions in a road/shoot recording environment rather than at home. They're a top 20 team in terms of points allowed per possession when they leave home rather than when they're at home. They're well outside the top 100. So that has been very much a fascination to me. They go up against a Bradley team that's been able to do a nice job locking it down with their defense. They're in the top 110 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, but this is a UIC team that is much better with their perimeter defense rather than Bradley. Bradley is going to allow you some open looks from 3, especially at home. They do allow opponents to shoot about 35% from 3-point range. Meanwhile, with UIC, 12th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, which declines to 28.9% in a road/shoot corner environment. You've had Connor Hickman be very rock solid and be really a main guy for this Bradley team. He's done a nice job being able to give out about 3 to 3.5 assists per contest. He's been able to supply the team with 14.5 points per game. And then Duke Dean, he's been able to give you about 4.2 assists to less than 2 turnovers per game. It's a Bradley team that overall has been able to ascend in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, as they're shooting in that neighborhood about 37.2% from 3-point range, and that really has been a little bit of a lifeblood for them. And this Bradley team is a different team on offense when they're at home rather than in a roadside-shoot record environment. Bradley 55th in the country in terms of points scored per possession, scoring about 7.9 points more per 100 possessions when they are at home. But when it comes to Bradley, I do think that even though they're going to have a nice advantage down low, Malevi Leons along with Darius Hannah, they've been able to combine for about 13.5 rebounds per game. UIC having the versatility of Toby Akani, I think, is big. 10.5 points, 7.5 boards. It's a UIC team that's outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate, but he's able to give this team 2.5 blocks. He's able to give you a steal and a half per contest. And then Isaiah Rivera being able to shoot at north of a 41% clip from 3-point range with 14.5 points per game. I do think it's going to be just enough to be able to keep this good UIC defense lively in this one. It is a circumstance where I did set my line at 12. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Illinois Chicago, and I do think that they do a good job on defense, and both of these teams well outside the top 150 in terms of total possessions per game. So did set my total 136, looking at the under, and I'm going to be taking a look at the points with UIC. 693, 694 on the betting board. Valparaiso is going to be playing us in Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa is a favorite of 7.5 points on the road total on this game, and between 143 and 143.5. I made Northern Iowa a 7-point favorites here at the 7.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Valparaiso. Valparaiso certainly does have their warts, but at the same time, they've been able to find some more primary scorers to be able to help them out. Isaiah Stafford has been tremendous for the team with about 16 points per contest. He's been able to throw in there about 3.5 awards, 2 assists, shoots only about 30% from 3, but the guys that surround him are all shooting right around about 36 to 36.5% from 3-point range. Darius DeViero, Cooper Schweiger, along with Jahari Williamson, all in that neighborhood, about 36 to 37% from the outside, with Schweiger being your top scorer with about 5.5 boards, and DeViero, 5.2 assists to about 2.7 turnovers per game. For a Valparaiso team that they keep it relatively clean, they turn the ball over about 11 times per contest. Neither of these teams necessarily going to be forcing a lot of action in terms of turnovers, and they do go up against a Northern Iowa team that has been in a rough go of it recently in terms of their offense. For this Northern Iowa bunch, they have scored now fewer than 70 points in 4 of their last 5 games, with the lone exception being when they were able to get to 72 points. And for Northern Iowa, just in general, this squad has always been one that hung their head on defense for the longest of times. At the beginning part of the season, they were playing no defense at all, and here in conference, they've been one of your best teams in the Missouri Valley of being able to D up. The offense just has not been there. They've been able to break the 72-point plateau just twice here in this calendar year, and for Valparaiso, even though they are a team that is outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, I do think that they're going to be able to do a nice job holding in this game. You've got Bowen Born, who's been able to give you 14-plus points per contest, but he's shooting in the low to mid-30s from 3-point range. Titan Anderson has been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game for Northern Iowa, but it's a team that shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range, with Nate Heisey trying to really take hold of the offense. I will say for Valparaiso at home, they are allowing opponents to shoot 37% from the outside. That's a bit of a concern. And for Northern Iowa, they themselves allow opponents to shoot about 35.2% from 3-point range. That is outside the top 270 as well, but I do think that both of these teams are going to have a little bit of a tough time executing. Northern Iowa, just in general, has been slip-sliding downward with regards to their offense. This Valparaiso team all season long has been relatively tough in terms of their offense, and for Northern Iowa, they actually do a halfway decent job on the glass, despite the fact that you really don't have anyone other than Anderson that gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. In terms of their rebound rate, they're about 196 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you do have a Valparaiso team that's about 333rd, so can't take Valparaiso to be able to get this outright win, but with the struggles that we've been seeing for Northern Iowa on offense, I do think that this is going to be a snug, lower scoring game. So I did set my line at 7. I'm going to be willing to take 7.5 with Valparaiso. Did set my total 141. I'm diving in on the under, and I'm going to be taking the points with Valpo. 695, 696 on the betting board. Loyola Chicago is going to be playing us to St. Joe's, and this is going to be the DK Network right to pick, as you're finding this total at a 150.5, and with Loyola Chicago, they are a 4.5 point favorite, and I really do like 2 plays here. I set St. Joe's as 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be taking a look at them outright on the money line, and with regards to right upsides, we missed on a side on Tuesday, so we're going to go back to totals. I'm going to be taking a look at the under in the spot with my write-up. I set my total at a 143.5. Now, St. Joe's has been seeing a pretty steady decline with their defense. They're now about 120th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Just a few weeks ago, this was a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and much of it has been due to the fact that they are now giving it up from 3-point range. They were one of the top teams in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage out of conference. They're now about 163rd in the country, but I do think that this game is not necessarily going to be as up-tempo as a lot of people are thinking it should be, for about a 150 or so total, as St. Joe's about 135th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Loyola Chicago, they're clocking in about 153rd, and Loyola Chicago has been very good with their defense this season. 32nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and both of these teams really do a nice job down low. Loyola Chicago, 2nd in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, for St. Joe's, when they're in a roadside-shoot corner environment, they've been doing a good job of holding teams down from inside the arc as well. 58th in the country with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You do have a very top-heavy St. Joe's team that they've got a few guys who will be able to come to the forefront and be able to light it up. Eric Reynolds has been your main guy, 17 points, shooting 40.5% from 3-point range, while Xavier Brown does shoot about 44.5% from the outside, as well as Brown along with Loon Greer are combining for about 7.3 assists to, in that neighborhood, about 4.2 turnovers per game. And then Rasheer Fleming is actually going to be your top rebounder in this game with about 7.2 rebounds per game. For Loyola Chicago, it's been so interesting. They're a top 75 team in the country with regards to rebound rate, and they really cut you off from being able to get second chances. Loyola Chicago offering a second chance on just 21.8% of misses in their home games, 41st overall with regards to their defensive rebound rate, but you don't have a single guy on this Loyola Chicago team that really gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. Their leader in boards is Miles Rubin with 4.8 rebounds per game. That's just a Loyola Chicago way. They don't grab a lot of second chances themselves. They don't get a lot of second chances too, but where I think that St. Joe's is going to be able to win this game, Loyola Chicago has been quite lackadaisical on offense. They are outside the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and the biggest reasons why, for one, they only shoot about 33.9% from three-point range at home. That's 226th in all of college basketball. And for two, they can't take care of the ball. 298th in the country with regards to percentage of offensive plays at home that result in a turnover, as Desmond Watson along with Philip Olsen are combining for 4 turnovers per contest. These two guys, they do combine for about 26 points per game. But Watson shoots 42% from 3, but Olsen is only shooting about 20% overall from 3-point range this season. It's been very touch and go with regards to the team's 3-point shooting, as now they've got Sheldon Edwards back in the fold, who has been a 46% 3-point shooter. But that said, he had a total of 9 points in the team's previous 2 games. He has erupted for 45 points in the last 2. He's overall averaging 6.3 points per game this season. You just don't know what you're going to be able to get out of a lot of these guys night in, night out. Now, to the credit of Loyola Chicago, in 10 out of their last 11 games against Division I opponents, and if you want to include the non-D1 teams, 11 out of their last 12, they have held their opponent to 70 points or fewer. So they've been able to do a tremendous job on defense. You've got a St. Joe's team that they have been able to score at least 79 points in each of their last 4 games, but I do think that for St. Joe's, they're going to be able to dial it back a little bit more on defense. When they've had their most success, they've been able to slow things down just a little bit more. It does feel like they're getting a little bit too harebrained and a little bit too fast for their own good. I do think that Loyola Chicago is going to be able to control the tempo in this game. I do think that both of these teams are going to be able to win out with their defense, as St. Joe's sit a little bit of a rough patch with their defense, but prior to this most recent 4-game stretch, they were a top 100 team in all of college basketball. I do think that that is going to shine through here in a game that's going to be a little bit more mid-tempo. Both of these teams do give it up from 3-point range. At St. Joe's, they are a team that they, in terms of percentage of points that come from made threes, are in the top 20 in all of college basketball, going up against the Loyola Chicago team that is 292nd in the country with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but that goes to 31.6% from 3 at home, 39.5% in a roadside-shoot-record environment, and St. Joe's overall being a relatively solid team from the outside as well with regards to their defense. I do think that things are going to be turning a little bit gross in terms of the offense, but I do think that in the end, you're going to see St. Joe's with the more dominant rebounders be able to take hold, and just Loyola Chicago not be able to execute on offense. I set my total 143.5. My DK Network grade to pick is on the under, and in this spot, I set St. Joe's as 1.5-point favorite, so looking at them outright on the money line. 697, 698 on the betting board. It is Iowa on the road facing off against Maryland, and Maryland does find themselves as a favorite of 4 to 4.5 points. Totals between 143.5 and 145, and with Maryland, I did set them as a favorite of 3.5 points. We'll take 4+ here with Iowa. Iowa does play quite differently with regards to their offense when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. They see a decline of about 14 points per 100 possessions when they are away from home, but this is still a pretty rock-solid offense, as 21st in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and though Maryland is able to shoot it better from 3-point range when they're at home, this is still a Maryland offense that they have not gotten a lot going thus far this season. Maryland is outside the top 125 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. For Maryland, you gotta love what Jameer Young has been able to bring to the table, as he's done a very solid job being able to supply this team with about 20.5 points, 4+ boards, 4+ assists. I mean, he's really been a do-it-all sort of player. And then Dante Scott has been able to shoot in the mid to high 30s from 3-point range along with Jameer Young. But past these two guys, you can't get a single guy that a jump shot on this team, as overall they're shooting 29.1% from distance. Maryland has actually done a nice job of being able to wrestle the ball away. They're a top 50 team with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis when they're at home. But that said, you've been having issues with regards to guys not named Julian Reese being able to pull in their boards. Julian Reese has been tremendous. He has been able to supply the team with 10+ rebounds per contest, and it is an Iowa team that they themselves are looking at Ben Krikke to be able to win that battle down low. He's been able to give the team right around about 5.5 to 6 rebounds per game for an Iowa team that is about 200th in the country with regards to being able to hit the glass in their rebound rate. Maryland is more on that neighbor, about 100th, and as we know, this is an Iowa team that is not going to go out there and is going to force a lot of turnovers. But the one thing that Iowa has actually been able to do, they don't guard the arc too bad. Iowa, in a roadside-shoot-record environment, allows opponents to shoot 32.5% from 3-point range. This turns completely harebrained at home at 37%, but when they leave home, they've honestly not been a horrible team at being able to guard the 3, and they go up against a Maryland team that, once again, they just aren't doing a great job of being able to hit from three-point range. Last time these two teams played, it was just the second time in their last 32 home games that Iowa was held below 75 points at Carver Hawkeye Arena. Now, I do think that they're going to be held down here because this is an Iowa team that is completely different when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. At Iowa, they're about 150th in the country with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They just don't generate those same turnovers when they're on the road, but I just fear that Maryland is not going to be able to do enough on offense to be able to pull away and to be able to cover this number, though I do think that things are going to be turned up tempo a little bit more. This Iowa team is in the top 50 with regards to total possessions per game, and for Maryland, the offense, it is so gross. It's been a little bit better recently as the squad has been able to get to at least 69 points in 3 of their last 5 games. That includes the game against Iowa that was 69-67. I do think that both teams are going to be a little bit warmer in this spot. In that first time around, you just saw a whole bunch of sloppy play and a whole bunch of turnovers. Iowa, a very uncharacteristic 14 turnovers in that one. I do think that they cleaned it up here. I do think that Iowa is going to be able to hold close enough in this game for late game filling. I did set my line at 3.5. I'm going to be willing to take 4+ here with Iowa. Made my total 147.5. So also looking at the over 699, 700 on the betting board. Auburn is going to be playing against South Carolina, and South Carolina is an underdog of 11 to 11.5 points. So this game is anywhere between 138.5 and 139. South Carolina just can't get a respect at this point. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Not that I think that South Carolina wins this game outright or anything like that, but that said, I set my line more around 9. With Auburn, this has been a team that's checked a lot of different boxes. This team does rank in the top 35 with regards to both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Auburn, they do a nice job of being able to retain the ball. Only about 10.5 turnovers per game while playing at a relatively up-tempo pace. That is a very good mark. They do only shoot about 32.9% from 3. This despite the fact that you've got Chad Baker-Mazara along Jalen Williams combining for about 22.5 points. They combine to shoot in that pocket about 38.5 to 39% from three-point range, but this has been an Auburn team that has been very balanced overall with Gianni Broome really being that main man down low, 2.5 blocks, 8.5 rebounds per game, and he's able to shoot 34% from three-point range, while Dylan Cardwell is able to give you about a block and a half per contest as well. That's a big reason why Auburn has been so good with their interior defense, but for South Carolina, this team just does a really nice job of having the whole be greater than the sum of its parts. They're a top 60 team in terms of their rebound rate, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It's a South Carolina defense that has been rock solid both at home and on the road. They're 41st overall in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis in a road/neutral court environment. That does slip to more around about 75th or so, but they're still doing a nice job with having Meechie Johnson supply the team with about 14 points, 3 assists. It's a South Carolina team that's officially shooting about 34.5% from three-point range. They've seen a little bit of drop off there, but the guy you want to take note of, Colin Murray Boyles. He was an afterthought towards the beginning part of the season, a guy that was a fringe top 100 recruit. He has just been able to erupt recently. 16 plus points in each of the last 3 games, including in the team's last game against Vanderbilt. 31 points, 7 rebounds. He has really been able to give this team a lot down low. So even though South Carolina might still be a little bit outgunned down low, not having to rely as much anymore on some of these ancillary pieces like a Josh Gray, who hasn't necessarily given you a whole heck of a lot, that really does elevate them. Meanwhile, Talon Cooper, 4.4 assists and 1.2 turnovers per game. South Carolina, they only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, and South Carolina has an uncanny and an innate ability to really put the brakes on a game. This team has given up north of 70 points in regulation in none out of their last, I believe now, 8 games. And the last time they gave up north of 70 points, they gave up 74 to an Alabama team that is playing at a breakneck pace. As a matter of fact, for South Carolina, they have given up north of 70 points once since the beginning of the month of December. I do think that this is going to be a game that is slowed down. I do think that South Carolina going to be able to hold in there as a result. I did set my total at 141. I do think that this has a possibility to be close enough for late game filling, and I do think that that slide of 70 points or fewer surrendered is going to be coming to an end against an Auburn team that is very well rounded and has gotten to at least 80 points in 3 of their last 4 games. So going to be one going on the over, but I do think that South Carolina holds in there. Set this line at 9, so take the points in the over. 7-1, 7-2 on the betting board. Western Carolina is road face off against Samford. Samford is a 6.5 to a 7-point favorite. Total on this game is 156.5. Made my total 157.5. I'm looking at the over with Western Carolina. This team is one of the slowest ones that you're going to find in all of college basketball, going up against the Samford team as one of the fastest ones that you're going to find in the country, with Samford 11th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Western Carolina outside the top 200, but you've got a pair of teams that they do a really good job of shot making. Samford is a top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, while Western Carolina is a top 100 team. Western Carolina actually has a top player in this game. That'd be Vontavious Woolbright. How about 22.5 points, 12.5 boards, 5.5 assists per game? The one thing that he doesn't do is pop threes, but That's why you've got a pair of guys in DJ Turn It Up Campbell along with Russell Jones, combined shoot about 42% from distance, both supplying you with about 12 points per contest. And Western Carolina, they do a really nice job taking care of the ball. Only about 10 turnovers per contest. Samford, one of the best teams in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so that's going to lead to a little bit of a scenario of something's got to give, and we have yet to see a first matchup between these two, so it's going to be a very fresh one. Meanwhile, for Samford, Anchor has really been your top scorer, and Anchor down for 15 points, 6 boards out of him for a Samford team that they shoot 40.5% from three-point range. They've been absolutely ridiculous from distance, and it's going to come down to whether or not Western Carolina is able to guard the three-point line, as Western Carolina all season long, they've actually been much better at being able to guard the arc when they've been away from home. At home, they allow opponents to shoot 37% from three, more like 32% in a roadside shoot court environment, and if you could break through the Samford initial wave of defense, there is open shots to be had. Samford at home allows opponents to shoot 37.5% from three-point range, so both of these teams should be able to find some good looks here, and then you just have the best facilitator being on the side of Samford as well. Ryland Jones has been a well-traveled gentleman, but he's now shooting about 39% from three-point range. He generates a steal and a half. He gives out nearly 4.5 assists to about 1.3 turnovers per game. He has been absolutely magnificent for the squad, and this does include Jermaine Marshall, who's been in and out of the fold all season long, but each of your top 5 scorers for Samford should at least 38.9% from three-point range. Overall, Samford shooting north of 40% from three-point range. I just think that it's going to be too much for Western Carolina to overcome, and Western Carolina, in their own right, 79 plus points scored in 4 of their last 5 games. Credit where credit is due to Samford. They've actually given up 72 points of fear in each out of their last 5 games, since they did have one game against Wofford where they did a lot more than that. So 4 out of their last 5 games, but overall for this Samford team, they are just an absolute bulldozer in terms of their offense. 75 plus points in all but 2 of their games since the turn of the calendar. I do think that you get a high scoring, up-tempo affair. I did set my total 157.5. I'm looking at the over. And with Samford, I just think that it's too much for Western Carolina to overcome. Set them as a 7.5 point favorite, so one to lay up to 7 with them. 7-3, 7-4 on the betting board. DePaul plays those to UConn. UConn is a 24-point road favorite, and your total on this game going to be finding it at a 141.5 to a 142.5. I set my line at 22. I'm going to be willing to take the points with DePaul. This DePaul team stinks. There's no question about it. They are going to get lambasted in this game. I just don't think that they get lambasted in this game quite enough to where they get completely blown out. As for DePaul, they've had Deshaun Nelson actually provide a relatively solid effort for the team with about 10.5 points, right around about 4.2 rebounds per game. DePaul does not have a single guy in the roster. They can see north of 4.3 rebounds per game. Donovan Clingan, giant of the earth for a UConn team that's in the top 20 with regards to rebound rate. He's going to be able to have his way down low. First time these two teams played, UConn won by a count of 85-56 on a day where a lot of things did go UConn's way. They went 12-26 from three-point range. You got Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer combining for about 31 points, 8 plus assists. Spencer shoots north of 40% from three. While Newton, it's a little bit hot and cold from three, but I would suspect things to iron out a little bit with ball shooting, just 2 of 13 from 3. And hey, DePaul won the turnover battle the first time around, 12-10. This DePaul team actually doesn't do the worst job of being able to retain the ball. They got absolutely lambasted on the glass the first time around, but that's going to happen again. Alex Caravan has been able to do a solid job, give you 6 plus rebounds per game for this UConn team. And quite frankly, the reserves of UConn are better than the starters for DePaul, especially with Jico Carter. Deal with an injury. Top scorer for DePaul has been able to give you 12 points, shooting about 37.5% from three-point range. But I do think that this has become a number that's just a little bit too lofty in general. You've been able to get a little bit more production as well out of Mr. Fisher out there in the backcourt. Elijah Fisher has given you about 9.5 points per contest. He's been able to give out a few assists as well, with about 2 assists per contest overall for the season. But if you look at him recently, he's been averaging about 3 assists per contest in the last 5 games. I do think that for DePaul, they are going to lose this game, and they're probably going to lose this game by 20. I just don't think that it's quite by 24. It's a DePaul unit that has given up 85 plus points in 4 of their last 5 games, which is relatively unsightly. But this is also a UConn team that they're looking to play a lot more defense-oriented, 65 points of fear surrendered in each of their last 6 games, though they still do rank in the top 10 nationally in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. So it's a case of something's got to give. I set my total at 144. I think that DePaul pretty much gets to exactly 60, that they lose this game by about like 22, 23 points. So I'm going to be willing to take the 24 here with DePaul, banking on them doing just enough to get to 60 points. So when I had the over, set my total 144, and going to be willing to begrudgingly take the points with DePaul. 7-5, 7-6 on the betting board. It is Tennessee. They had third face off against Arkansas, and Arkansas just find themselves as a home underdog of 9 points, and your totals between 150.5 and 151.5. With Arkansas, I did set them as an underdog of 8.5 points. 9 is my absolute minimum buy point here, but it is my buy point. For Tennessee, this team has been significantly better with their offense this season. They have now ascended into the top 40 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they've got that go-to scorer in Dalton Knecht, who is connecting from three-point range, 20.5 points, shooting 40.5% from distance for a Tennessee team that, in terms of turnovers per possession, they're a top 35 team in all of college basketball, and they've been able to do a tremendous job on the glass as well. Josiah Jordan-James, Jonas Aidoo, these two guys have been able to give you about 13.5 rebounds per game. Toby Awaka, I recognize, has been a little bit in and out of the fold, but even though he doesn't give you a lot of scoring, he does a nice job being able to supply about 4.5 rebounds per game. And Arkansas just needs to get a little bit more out of their bigs because, like Chandler Lawson, when he's been out there, has been able to give you a little bit of shot blocking, but really other than Trayvon Brazile, you don't have a single guy in the roster that gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. As a result, this Arkansas team is outside the top 200 with regards to their rebound rate, and for Tennessee, this squad has been able to do a really good job of locking down with that regard, but this is a Tennessee defense that, as we know, they can be a little bit inconsistent when they do hit the road. This is a Tennessee team that, despite the fact that the defense isn't quite what it was a season ago, that does need to be mentioned. This team is still 28th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, though they do give up 17.9 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than when they are in Knoxville. And with Arkansas, you still do have a pair of guys in the backcourt, and Tremont Mark, Khalif Battle were able to put the ball in the basket. Battle gives you 10 points on 38% three-point shooting. Mark, he's your top scorer, 17.5 points, shoots about 37.5% from the outside. So Arkansas still has some top flight guys that are able to launch from three-point range, and you just look up and down the roster, and there's a lot of talent. They just need to have that one main facilitator, because right now Devo Davis, with his 2.2, 2.3 assists per contest, he's leading the way with that regard, and that's really what's been so befuddling with this Arkansas team. They have not assigned anyone that main point guard role. Fortunately for them, with this Tennessee team, they're not generating as many turnovers as they did a season ago. They're still really good at generating turnovers, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but the defense has taken a little bit of setback, and for Arkansas, they're starting to find it a little bit more with their offense. 74 plus points in each of their last three games after they had that stretch against like Ole Miss, Kentucky, where they weren't getting to 60 in any of those games. I do think that we are going to get points up on the board in this game. I set my total at a 152.5. Tennessee, just not the same team defensively when they're on the road, and Arkansas does seem to be finding a little bit on offense, so I'm going to be willing to take 9 plus here with Arkansas and taking a look at the over. 707, 708 on the betting board. Oregon State is road face-off against Arizona State. Arizona State is a 6.5 to a 7-point favorite, and your total on this game is between 136.5 and 137, and with Arizona State, I did make them the favorite of 9 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Oregon State does have some very demonstrative home and road splits, and even though you do have Jordan Pope, who's been able to supply the team with 17 plus points per contest, really other than Dexter Akano, has been able to give you about 12 points per contest, there's just absolutely nothing surrounding them in the backcourt. And Oregon State, if you look at their overall defense, it's 219th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but in a setting where they are away from home, so in a roadside-neutral court environment away from Corvallis, they're giving up 22.2 points more per 100 possessions rather than at home. Now, they do get to face off against an Arizona State team that's outside the top 260 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and really other than Jose Perez, who's able to shoot well north of 40% for three, you really don't have a lot of outside presence there, but when it comes to Arizona State, this team has still been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of their defense. 119th in the country, with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, giving up 11 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home. You've got a Oregon State team that does rank well outside the top 150 with regards to rebound rate. Now, Arizona State, among power conference teams, a bottom 5 power conference team in terms of their rebound rate, but they do have guys they're able to do a nice job of being able to lock it down low in terms of just not allowing you to get clean looks, like a Brian Sedlbongu, who's been able to give you about 4 rebounds per game. Alonzo Gaffney gives you a little bit over a block per contest, and then Frankie Collins does a nice job ripping the ball away. 3 steals, 14 points, 3.5 assists per contest, and I was mentioning the big giant home and road splits that you've got on defense with Oregon State. Well, you've got similar ones with regards to their offense as well. It just feels like Oregon State can't buy a bucket when they're on the road this season, as they're scoring about 13 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. 282nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and even though this Arizona State team, they themselves are very grody in terms of their offense, I do think that they're going to be able to find a way to be able to get it done, especially with them getting a little bit of sign of life from Adam Miller, who's been able to supply the team with about 11 points per contest. He's been a little bit inconsistent, but overall for Arizona State, them turning the ball over just 10.5 times per contest, and them being in their friendly confines where they are able to average about 7.5 points more per 100 possessions rather than when away from home. I do think that they do just enough to be able to get it done. Set my line at 9. I'm going to be willing to lay with Arizona State, and did set my total 135. I think both teams really struggle with their offense, so looking at the under and going to be willing to lay with Arizona State. 709, 710 on the betting board. Wyoming, they play us Utah State. Utah State is a favorite of 7 to 7.5 points, total on this game between 152 and 152.5. Meet my line 6.5. I do award a little bit more home court advantage for Wyoming in a just natural setting where you're not at elevation like this. I probably would be closer to a 7.5 in this one, but I'm going to be willing to take the points with Wyoming. Wyoming has been really good from 3-point range, and they've been really bad at taking care of the ball in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Wyoming, a bottom 50 team in all of college basketball, but also a top 55 team with their 3-point shooting percentage, shooting about 37.5% from the outside. Sam Griffin, a cool cod, they've combined for 32.7 points, about 6 assists per contest. Problem has been between the two of them, they've been turning the ball over about 5.5 times per contest as well, but also with Wyoming in a game that might involve some fouling. They are having each other top 4 scorers shooting at least 80% of the free throw line, and I do think that that's of significance in this ordeal. Now, Utah State is going to be able to dominate down low. Wyoming, well outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate. Utah State, a top 50 team with this regard, with Grado Sabor being very great. 9.5 boards, 18.5 points per game, and Utah State is a top 30 team in the country with regards to points scored on a per possession basis, despite shooting just 32.2% from 3-point range. And the reason why is Darius Brown is just really good with the ball. Only 1.8 turnovers and 6.6 assists per game, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range, provides about 11.5 points per game. Josh Oduje has been able to give you about 8.5 points per game as well. He's come along for the ride for Utah State. Other than Ian Martinez, you don't really have a lot of outside threats, and for this Wyoming team, it has been a little bit ghastly for them, just trying to be able to guard the 3-point arc for Wyoming. They really do give it up from 3-point range. Opponents are shooting from distance 37.1% from 3 against them at home. It actually falls to about 31% in a roadside shoot record environment. That said, you go up against a Utah State team that they just do really not allow a lot of open looks, 10th of the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, so it's a very interesting ordeal. I do think that Wyoming's still going to be able to hit a few threes, and I do think that the elevation is going to take it out of Utah State a little bit, despite the fact that they're used to it over there at Logan, over there in the Mountain West, where there's a lot of tumultuous travel. They're going to be able to adapt to it better than most, but I do think that Wyoming does just enough to be able to hold in there. I did set my line at 6.5, so I'm going to be willing to take 7+ here, and did set my total 148.5 with the way that Utah State cuts off the 3-point arc, and with the way that Utah State, not necessarily the world's greatest 3-point shooting team. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under and the points with Wyoming. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 7-11, 7-12, it is Fresno State playing us at UNLV. UNLV, a 3.5 to a 4.5 point road favorite, with your total between 138.5 and 139.5. Made UNLV a full 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. UNLV has been one of the most random teams in all of college basketball. Same team that got lambasted by 32 points at home against Air Force has already blown out Creighton by double figures this year. So you never know what you're going to get out of this team, but it does feel like things are starting to move in the right direction for them. And for UNLV, it's just really hard to take a look at the metrics with this team. They're outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate. They're outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But yet this team is just pulling out a bunch of wins. And a big reason why they've been able to ascend is their freshman point guard in Dedrin Thomas, giving you 6 assists, 12.5 points per contest on 37.5% 3-point shooting. And he has really been tremendous here in the last few games. He has committed a grand total of 7 turnovers in the last 4 games, all while being able to give out 21 assists and providing 12+ points in all 4 of those games, going up against the Fresno State team that is in the bottom 75 in terms of being able to take care of the ball. You've got a good point guard in Isaiah Hill, who only gives out about 2.4 turnovers, 6.5 assists per game, shoots about 34% from 3, 12.5 points per game, and Xavier Dussel has been able to shoot about 42.5% from distance. He's able to give you about 11 points per contest, but this team, other than Eduardo Andre 3000 and Yak Boyaki, they really don't have a ton down low, and Mr. Andre has been dealing with injury. He has been out ever since the first time these two teams played on January 30th, and when these teams did match up on January 30th, that did not go the way of Fresno State. They lost that game by a count of 78-69. That was an affair where UNLV, they only went 6 of 18 from 3-point range, but they did a very thorough job of winning that turnover battle by a count of 21-13. I do think that things slow down here. Both of these teams outside the top 200 with regards to total possessions per game. With the Boone brothers, they had to combine 18 rebounds in that first affair, and especially with Eduardo Andre dealing with injury, I do think that that really puts Fresno State at an uphill battle. I did set my total more around 139. It does feel like both of these teams are going to give up a lot of looks from 3-point range. Fresno State well outside the top 310 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, UNLV, they allow opponents to shoot about 34.6% from 3-point range. That is about 244th in all of college basketball. Seeing a lot of 139.5. This opened up at a 140, so you're at the 139.5, looking under, and with UNLV, want to lay up to 4.5 with them. Now let's hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games
games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502. Boston U, it's the road face-off against Army, and Army is a favorite of a point. I'm seeing them as a pick 'em in some spots as well. Totals between 124 and 124.5. I did set Army as a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Army. It has been all sorts of bad in terms of their offense. They're outside the top 310 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but Army is going to do a nice job of cutting off the 3-point line. They're a top 80 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They've actually been a little bit worse with their 3-point shooting defense at home rather than in a roadside shoot corner environment, and they are giving up about 2.8 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. But Boston U, a bottom 50 team in the country with regards to points scored on a per possession basis. Now, for Boston U, they actually travel really well with their defense. They actually give up 9.2 points fewer per 100 possessions in a roadside shoot corner environment rather than at home. I do think that is going to stabilize a little bit here. I do like Charlie Peterson, great name, who's been able to give this Army team right around about 4.5 rebounds per game. Josh Govins has been able to come to the forefront with about 12 points per game, and his 12 points per game makes him the top scorer in this game. Boston U really doesn't have anyone other than Miles Brewster that gives you north of 9.5 points per contest. He supplies 10.5 points, a little bit over 3 assists, shoots 41.5% from 3, but Boston U also shoots about 68% of the free throw line. Now, Army, they shoot about 60% at the free throw line. It's been all sorts of rough and grimy in terms of both of these offenses. Credit where credit is due for Boston U, 70-plus points in 2 of their last 3 games, but one of those games was against the very up-tempo Lehigh. Meanwhile, Army, they just continue to put the clamps down on you on defense. This Army team has allowed fewer than 70 points in all but one of their games this calendar year. I do think that they're going to be able to do a good job making this game very, very slow. I think perhaps we went a little bit too far in terms of this total, especially with Boston U starting to heat up a little bit. So did set my total 126.5. I think that this is close enough for late game felling. I'm going to be taking a look at the over. And with Army, made them a 2.5-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take them as a 1-point favorite / pick them to go along with this low total over. 306-503, 306-504. The Blue Hosts of Presbyterian hit the road to face off against UNC Asheville, and Asheville does find themselves as a 10.5 to an 11-point favorite. Total on this game going to be getting it at a 149.5. I did set my line at 11.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Asheville. UNC Asheville has been able to do a very dominant job of just taking over games down low with having Drew Pember be so well-rounded, and at 6'10", he's able to give you about a block and a half. He's able to give you 19 points, 7 boards. Absolutely loves what he brings to the table for the team. Going up against a Presbyterian team that, just frankly, they're not going to be able to match up with that. And for UNC Asheville last year, the big bugaboo for the team was that they were outside the top 275 with regards to turnovers per possession. Still a little bit of an issue, but they're down to about 12 turnovers per contest this season. That's relatively on par with this Presbyterian team, a Presbyterian team that's just 267th in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate. And for Presbyterian, they're going to be looking to bomb from the outside, but Asheville, a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They couple that with being the better rebound rate team in this game at 221st, with Nicholas McMillan being able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. Asheville also does a nice job of doling out the ball with Caleb Burgess, giving you 5 assists, about 2.5 turnovers per game. Meanwhile, Marquise Barnett, he's having to do it all for Presbyterian. Saints shoot it from 3-point range, 14.5 points, 2.5 assists, only shoots 27% from 3 to Samaje Teal, him shooting 44% from distance. He's really able to light it up there, but for Presbyterian, they are shooting about 66% at the free throw line. I feel like this team did get a little bit overvalued after their triumph over Vanderbilt. That at the time was a very good win. Come to find out that this team was going to sink this season, but for Presbyterian, this team does see a fall off of about 8.5 points fewer per 100 possessions scored when they're in a roadside shoot corner environment rather than when they are at home. And when it comes to the UNC Asheville team, I do think that they really do take it to them. And with this UNC Asheville team, this team, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they're on 10th at all of college basketball. So I did set my total at a 147.5. I don't think the Presbyterian does their part with this total. You've got a Presbyterian team that is very mid-tempo and a Presbyterian offense that in general has been hot and cold all season long. They're on a nice run. They've been able to score at least 70 points in 3 of their last 5 games, but Asheville, they themselves starting to bear it down a little bit more defensively, having given up 64 points in their last game against USC Upstate. So looking at the under, and want to lay up to 11 with the UNC Asheville, 306-505, 306-506. Charleston Southern plays us to Gardner Webb. Gardner Webb is a 5-point road favorite. Your total on this game between 141.5 and 142. Set Gardner Webb is a 3.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Charleston Southern. This Gardner Webb team, just not the same team defensively that they have been in past years. They're outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're about 160th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Now, Gardner Webb, a better team at guarding the arc when they're away from home, allowing opponents to shoot 31.2% from 3-point range away from home compared to 37.2% from 3 at home, but you tell that they're just missing the rim protectors and Lufail DeFeel along Kareem Reed down low from the season ago. Both of those guys combined for about 3 blocks per contest. This season, Gardner Webb as a collective is getting about 2.2 blocks per game. They do have Julian Sawarmo, who's able able to give you 13 points, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, and they've been able to get some relatively good production out of Mr. Caleb Robinson with about 6.5 boards, 14 points per game as a 6'4", do-it-all sort of stat sheet suffer. But for Charleston Southern, even though they are a team that has a little bit of a lesser rebound rate than Gardner-Webb, both of these teams are just really outside the top 200. I think that's pretty comparable on both fronts. And for Charleston Southern, this is a squad that is going to turn it over maybe a little bit more than what you'd like, but they've been able to ascend a little bit more with regards to their defense because they've got R.J. Johnson, who's been able to supply the team with about 16.5 points per contest. All in all, it's a Charleston Southern team that does shoot about 34.2% from three-point range. They shoot north of 75% at the free throw line. They're just 314th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they go up against the Gardner-Webb team that's 253rd in their own right. You've been able to have Tajay Kelly be able to supply the team with about 8 rebounds per contest. They dealt with TJ Patrick being in and out of the fold, but he was able to return last week against Winthrop, so there's a good chance that he's going to be able to play in this game as well. So I do think that with Charleston Southern, you're getting some good value here against a Gardner-Webb team that typically hangs their head on defense. They've now given up 70-plus points each out of the last 4 games, going up against a Charleston Southern unit that, hey, they have been able to win 2 out of their last 3 games, and they've given up 71 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 4. So going to be willing to take the points with Charleston Southern. Made this a line of 3.5, and did make my total a 143.5 with the way that Gardner-Webb has given up the points. So looking at the over end, looking at Charleston Southern getting points. 306.507, 306.508. High point is going to be playing us to USC Upstate. High point hopes to not be a low point as 14 to 14.5 point favorites. Totals between 152 and 152.5. And with High Point, I did set them as a favorite of 12 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with the USC Upstate. Upstate has been rough in terms of their defense. They are well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And this is an Upstate team that they are going to give it up from three-point range as well. UNC Upstate, in terms of their opponent's three-point shooting percentage, they are about 294th in all of college basketball, but actually do a better job of guarding the arc when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. And for High Point, this team is outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis as well. And High Point is going to give you some looks from three-point. Sure, I'm 58th in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. And you've got Trey Bordeaux on the flip side for USC Upstate. He's been able to give you 14 points per game. High Point certainly does have a lot more firepower. Kamani Lawrence, along with Jocelyn Bodu have been able to combine for about 15 rebounds per game. And I like what you're able to get out of Kesagifa along with Duke Miles. These two guys have been able to combine for just under 35 points, 7 assists. They combined to shoot about 37.5% from 3, and High Point, a top 30 team in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But for this USC Upstate team, they've been able to ascend a little bit more in terms of their offense as well. At least 69 very nice points in 4 of their last 5 games. You've got Amir Langlis, who's been able to supply the team with about 6 boards per contest. Now for Upstate, they do shoot 64% of the free throw line, and that is relatively rough, but they're one of the better teams out here in the Big South of being able to generate turnovers. Now, it is a squad that has been able to do a very solid job of being able to retain the ball in High Point, but I do think that the different looks that USC Upstate is going to throw at them, as they're a team that they gamble a little bit for turnovers, I do think that it's going to cause them to be a little bit out of sorts in terms of their overall offense. For USC Upstate, this team is a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis away from home, and I do think that that keeps this a lively game. I set my total at 148. I do think that it's going to disrupt this High Point offense, looking at the under, and I'm willing to take the 14 here with Upstate. 306.509, 306.510. Colgate is going to be playing us Holy Cross. Holy Cross is an 18.5 to a 19.5 point underdog. Total on this game between 141 and 141.5 with Colgate. I did set them as a favorite of 17 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points. With Holy Cross, it's been wholly awful for this team. They are well outside the top 250 in terms of points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. With Holy Cross, they're a team that has really given it up from three-point range. They're 58th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, going up against Colgate team that they're not where they have been in past years. Typically, this Colgate team is a top 10 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage, though they are now 35th in the country with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but they still do have that one guy that's able to do it all like they've had in past years. This year it's Braden Smith. Smith supplying the team with 15 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. Love the way that he's able to stuff the stat sheet, and Keegan records at 6'10". He's able to give you about 6 boards. He's able to pop it from three-point range, but Holy Cross has looked like a different team ever since Bo Montgomery has been able to return to the fold. Bo Montgomery registering for the year 10 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range. He was missing for 7 games earlier this season. When he came back, this team did get an instant little bit of a boost, and then you've got a trio of guys, Will Batchelor Mercer, Joe Nugent, along with A.J. Willis, who have all been able to shoot at least 37.9% from three-point range. This trio, they've been able to combine for about 18 points per game. They don't give you a lot of rebounding. Holy Cross is one of your worst teams in the country with regards to rebound rate, but it's not like this Colgate team has been doing anything impressive with regards to the glass as well. Jeff Woodward was expecting a little bit more than 4.5 rebounds per game out of him. For Colgate, they only do turn the ball over about 11 times per contest, and for Colgate, this has really become more of a defense-oriented team. While they have been able to score at least 73 points each of their last 5 games, they have now given up 64 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games, and while Colgate, not quite that same team with regards to their offense that they've been in past seasons, this is a team that in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they have been all the more dominant, 59th in the country with this regard, giving up about 11.2 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home. So I did set a little lower total in this one, set my total 137, diving in on the under, while Holy Cross can have a tough time matching up with this Colgate team. It does feel like Holy Cross is giving you a little bit more of a sign of life, having given up 67 points or fewer in 3 of the last 4 games. So we'll take the points here and looking at the under. 3-6-5-11, 3-6-5-12. Eastern Kentucky is going to be playing on Chicago State. Chicago State is a 12 to an 11.5 point underdog. Totals between 142 and seeing it's straight 142.5 out there as well. So my total 145. I'm looking at the over. Chicago State outside the top 200 with regards to total possessions per game. Chicago State legitimately has not been a bad defense this year. They're a top 40 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but got an Eastern Kentucky team that is really just going at it in terms of their offense, and they're a team that is really giving up when it regards to their defense as well. For Eastern Kentucky, this team has allowed at least 75 points in each of their last 5 games, and they've gotten to at least 75 points, and I believe now all but one of their games since the turn of the calendar. So Eastern Kentucky really cranking up the tempo. They are outside the top 325 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentages. They've been focusing on the interior. Isaiah Cozart, 15.5 points, 9.5 boards, a nation-leading 3.9 blocks per contest, while this team shoots about 36% from 3-point range. Michael Moreno, 10.6 boards, shoots 41% from the outside. Devontae Blanton has been able to shoot about 35% from 3. You've got guys with size. They're able to pop it from 3-point range, and if there is a little bit of kryptonite with regards to the Chicago State defense, they are going to allow you some open looks from 3-point range. As Chicago State has been allowing opponents in a roadside scoring environment to shoot about 33.1% from 3-point range. That's slightly above average. They're not quite the same on the road as they are at home. At home, that does drop to about 30% from the outside, but for Chicago State, it's all about can they have someone like a Noble Crawford along with Brent Davis, a pair of guys they're combining for about 4.5 steals per contest to be able to come up with those. You've got Wesley Carden, who might be the best player out there on the floor outside of really what you're able to get down low out of Cozart. 18 points, 4.5 boards, shoots 37% from 3-point range, and there's going to be a lot of open looks there. Jayshawn Corbett figures to lose that battle down low for Chicago State. He's been able to give the team only about 8 rebounds per game, but we've seen the Chicago State team time and time again be able to cover these games because for Chicago State, they're looking for something to prove going into a conference next season. Meanwhile, you've got an Eastern Kentucky team in which this is a little bit of a tune-up. They might be trying some things. We've seen a lot of teams go up against Chicago State and throw at them different looks than what they typically do, and typically they're a little bit of a fish out of water. I do think that there's going to be a lot of wide open looks from the perimeter for really both of these teams. So I set my total 145. We're going to have the over. So Chicago State is an 11-point dog, so we'll take the 12 of them to go along with the over. 3-6-5-13, 3-6-5-14. Queens NC is going to be playing us in North Florida. Mighty Osprey and North Florida are a 2-point underdog with your total between 164 and 164.5. Set North Florida as an underdog of 1.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to take 2+ here with them. Both of these teams have been absolutely dreadful in terms of their defense. Queens NC is well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and North Florida is 334th in all of college basketball. Now, at North Florida, you've got more explosive 3-point shooting on this team. Queens NC shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range, right around about 33.5%. Meanwhile, you've got the best scorer on the floor on the side of North Florida, as Chaz Lanier, 19.5 points, 4.5 boards, shoots 46.5% from 3, which ascends to 47.8% in a roadside shoot court environment. Now, you've got not a lot down low for either of these teams. You've got Dorian James for North Florida is able to give you about 5.2 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for Queens NC, they actually have the best rebounder in this game, BJ McLaurin, who's able to give you about 6 boards per contest, but both of these teams are going to be really lacking on that front end. For Queens NC, they actually do a halfway decent job guarding the arc. Opponents shoot about 33% from 3-point range against them. Meanwhile, in North Florida, it's very laissez-faire with them, as for North Florida, they allow you to shoot from 3-point range about 35.8%. That's 303rd in all of college basketball. They allow you to shoot north of 40% from 3-point range when they are on the road as well. So I certainly do think that there's going to be some explosiveness. Both Queens, they just don't have a lot down low in general to really speak of, even though North Florida is a squad that they really don't have those guys that are going to go out there and they're going to give you like 10 rebounds or anything like that. They're about 321st in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. They're certainly not going to get lambasted against a Queens NC team that is outside the top 275 with this regard as well. They're 282nd, and with North Florida having someone like Jake Vanderheiden, who stands 6'8", being able to pop threes. Meanwhile, for Queens NC, it could be a little bit touch and go, and we have been noticing that this Queens NC team has been blowing a lot of games late. It does make it a little bit difficult there going up against a North Florida team that has been able to get to at least 74 plus points on the regular. As a matter of fact, for North Florida, they've gotten to at least 74 points in all but one of their games this calendar year. Meanwhile, for Queens NC, they have just been bleeding points, giving up 75 plus points in every one of their games this calendar year. This is a spot where I do think that points are going to be very plentiful. Last time these two teams played, North Florida won that game 91-75. I do think the Queens NC gets their revenge, but I set this line at 1.5. I'm going to be willing to take the deuce here with North Florida. Did set my total more in that neighborhood, about 163.5. The first time these two teams met, you did see North Florida go 16 of 37 from 3. I think that they cool down to more of a modest 36-37% clip, which should give you just enough for an under. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to take 2+ here with North Florida. 3-6-5-15, 3-6-5-16. Radford and Winthrop has been canceled. I am not sure why, but we can't bet on it, so that's all that matters. We move on. 3-6-5-17, 3-6-5-18. Kennesaw State, we give our to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. They are playing us to Jacksonville. Jacksonville is an underdog of 5.5 points. Their total on this game is 154, and I did set Jacksonville as an underdog of 10.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Kennesaw State has been a little bit up and down recently, but this has been a Jacksonville unit that, man, it has been rough for them to say the least. You've been able to get some good production out of Robert McCray with about 17 points, 3 assists per contest, and from 3-point, he shoots about 33% from 3. It's a Jacksonville team, though, that they really have to hold their hat on offense because they're just not guarding a soul right now. Jacksonville, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 299th in all of college basketball. And for this Jacksonville team, when they're in a road/neutral court environment, they are giving up about 24.5 points more per 100 possessions rather than when they are at home. They're a bottom 15 team in the country in terms of points allowed per possession when they're away from home. They really don't have a lot down low ever since Bryce Workman has went out of the fold and has been dealing with an injury. Marcus Nyblack has had a lot of versatility, 3 assists, 4 boards, 11.5 points per game, but now he's out due to injury as well. Meanwhile, you've got a Kennesaw State team that, while the defense has certainly been having their issues recently, you still have Simeon Kodal, Tyler Burton, who have been able to combine for about 32.5 points per contest. Burton has been able to give you 6.3 assists and 2.6 turnovers per game. And for Kennesaw State, they're number 1 in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and yet they only turn the ball over about 11.7 times per contest. That's actually relatively solid. Desmond Robinson, him being able to supply 7 rebounds per game, should allow this team to be able to win the battle down low, even though Jacksonville overall for the season hasn't been quite as bad on the glass. This is a Kennesaw State team that, with regards to rebound rate, they're well outside the top 250, with this regard, as a matter of fact, 277th. All those injuries, they are really starting to pile up for this team, other than Stephon Payne, who was able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. Not a lot to speak of down low for Jacksonville, and I will say for Jacksonville, this team has actually scored fewer than 65 points in 4 of the last 5 games. Meanwhile, Kennesaw State has given up at least 85 points in each of their last 5 games. This is a classic case of something's got to give, and I think what gives here is both teams just absolutely give it up. I set my total at 160.5. I'm looking at the over with Kennesaw State because I do think they get their style. I think they dominate. I'm willing to lay up to 10 with them. 3-6-5-19, 3-6-5-20. Navy plays also American. American is a road favorite of 1.5 points. Total on this game is 132.5. I said Navy is a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be looking at Navy outright on the money line. While this American team has been able to do a nice job of being able to hit the glass, they're a top 125 team in terms of their rebound rate, and for American, they're shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. After last season, they were one of the least efficient offenses in all of college basketball, 14 plus turnovers per game. They have lowered that to 11 this season. They've been much better on that front, but now they are well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And this Navy team, I do think, is going to be able to be a nice kryptonite to this American team, in which they do a solid job of being able to guard the 3-point line. For Navy, they are allowing opponents to shoot about 33.2% from 3-point range when they're at home, so they do a solid job on that front. Now, American, they're going to have the most versatile player out there on the floor. Mark Rogers was able to give you 15 points, 6 boards at 6'8". He's able to pop it in the mid-30s from 3-point range, while Elijah Stevens has been your main point guard. He has given out 5.2 assists to 2.3 turnovers per game, but I really like what Asim Majini has been able to provide for this Navy team as well. He's supplying you with about 16 points, 4 assists from 3-point range. Is not really a guy that's going to be able to light it up, but you've also got Donovan Draper, who is able to give you 9 boards, 2.2 steals, 10.3 points per game, just an ultimate stat sheet sufferer. Now, for Navy, they only shoot about 29% from three-point range. That is a little bit of an issue for this team, but they are a team that they only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest. They do a nice job of being able to retain it, and much like Navy did 2 seasons ago, they're back to being able to generate a whole bunch of live ball turnovers to be able to turn their defense into offense. Navy, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, 15th in all of college basketball. They force a turnover on 24.1% of possessions at home. That is a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. And I do think that American, who has had a history of turning the ball over quite a bit in some of these Patriot League games, I think that they're going to have a tough time with that. I think that Navy turns defense into offense. I said Navy as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on the money line. Set my total 134. Do think that this game is still good enough for late game fouling, so also looking at the over. And wrap things up with 306-521, 306-522. It is Lafayette playing us to Loyola, Maryland. Loyola, Maryland is an underdog of 8.5 to 9 points. Total on this game between 125 and 125.5. Said Lafayette is a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Just hilarious. So Lafayette did not have a single win against a D1 opponent in the non-conference portion of the schedule, and yet here they are in the top 3 of the Patriot League right now. As Lafayette has been able to bat down the hatches a little bit more with their defense. They're a top 200 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and for Lafayette, certainly their defense still does have a few cracks in it, but they've been able to ascend in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis into the top 110 in all of college basketball. They give up the same amount of points per possession in a road/shoot record environment rather than at home. Meanwhile, you've got a Loyola Maryland team that is 279th in the country with this regard, with the big issue for this team being their 3-point shooting defense, but they allow opponents to shoot 34.9% from 3-point range away from home. That actually ascends to 37.7% from 3 when they're at home. And you've got a pair of guys that should be able to help out the backcourt for this team. Deion Perry, he's been able to do a nice job giving out about 3 assists, supplying this Loyola Maryland team with 13 plus points per contest, and then you've been able to have D'Angelo Steins be your main guy, being able to shoot it from 3-point range. Mr. Steins, 9.5 points on 36.5% 3-point shooting. Now Loyola Maryland, 14 turnovers, and they shoot 65% at the free throw line, but Lafayette, not a team that's really generating a lot of turnovers, and it's a Lafayette team that has been very much all over the place with regards to both their offense and their defense. The double overtime game against Lehigh certainly does warp their metrics quite a bit. That was 64-64 at the end of regulation, and then it went to double overtime. So this team in regulation has scored 66 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, but they surrendered 66 or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Loyola Maryland team that have scored 67 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, but they've given up 70 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 as well. I feel like this is going to be just a low-scoring slog involving a Lafayette team that they have yet to find a guy that's able to give you double figures. Eric Soderberg leads the way with 9.2 points per contest, shoots 40% from 3, but Lafayette, they're outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They really don't have much by way of 3-point shooting other than Soderberg. You've got Justin Vanderbond, who gives you about 9 points, 5 rebounds per game in Loyola Maryland. Rough on the glass, but you do have Golden DK, give you 7 rebounds per game. I think that'll be just enough for them to be able to stay snug in this one. I set my line at 7.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the 9 here with Loyola Maryland, and I do think that because you're going to be able to get some late game fouling here, that you're going to be close enough for that, and I do think that as a result, you're going to get just enough points for an over. Set my total 127.5, went over, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Loyola Maryland, and that'll wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to Curtis Rogers of 710 Seattle Sports for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at UNN_41. Keep in mind, letters DM, maybe does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, terrible fire and whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast, I have that 5-star review coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season, and that means I'm coming at you when it's good tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. BetterHelp recently surveyed over 16,000 people and found that while 75% of people believe it's wise to seek support, only 27% of Americans are in therapy, and people stay silent to avoid being judged. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching you with the right therapist, because we're all better with help. Visit BetterHelp.com/StopTheStigma for their first ever State of Stigma report, the latest in mental health research.
Oh, Mrs. Garcia, you're a school counselor and new homeowner and grad student. You're an ANDer. National University supports the whole you, so you can focus on what matters most. Learn more at nu.edu.